things were not very frequent. When they did happen, they were extreme. And so we got together, we realized that here in Florida, in the Orlando area, we had great expertise. We have a great university doing some great things. Great professors like Dr. Yusel, he wasn't there then, but it's had a tradition of great scholars. And we have, largest rental car market, we have English rental car, we wanted to help solve the problem. US DOT, Florida DOT, City of Orlando at the heart of it. General Motors, the largest automotive manufacturer in the country. And we came together and did DraftTech. And DraftTech was a forerunner of all the vehicle navigation systems. And we solved that problem, we never acted on it. But that is at the heart of what Smart City is, okay? Using technology and using partnerships, looking around the region, who are your stakeholders, what do they have to bring to the table, and solving a problem. So, we kind of sat on our hands for a long time, didn't do anything about that. Other people took DraftTech and all that and ran with it. And Orlando never really developed that ecosystem out of that and, developed the next generations. I want to say Orlando, loosely using the term because people down in Melbourne call themselves Orlando, the Orlando Melbourne Airport. People in Ocala are calling themselves Orlando, So we got a brand that's good, recognized worldwide, that we want to preserve and enhance, and we're happy that others are coming to the table. So why are we doing Smart City? Yes. So our mayor is an environmental civil engineer, right? Became a lawyer, was a state legislator, senator, and now mayor. And so he's got a good perspective on it, and he wanted to make sure that we're using technologies on a continuing basis, an affordable basis, right? It's got to be affordable, and we want to be that great place to live, work, play with the family, ensure that environmental stewardship, attract creative class, promote economic development. And we want to earn and retain the branding, and we want to pursue regional partnerships, like I said. We've got folks like NASA that do incredible things back from the 60s with the space race. Hey, we're not taking advantage of them. We want to take advantage of them right now.
So for those who I don't know, my name is Chris Castro. I'm the Director of Sustainability at the City of Orlando. And building on Charles's introduction here, I think it's important to realize that Mayor Dyer is really one of the biggest, I guess you can say, the biggest force for us to begin pursuing not just a smart city, but how to become a smart and sustainable city. This is a quote of his that really has stuck with me from the first time that I heard him speak. And that is to make Orlando the most environmentally friendly, socially inclusive, technology-enabled, and economically vibrant city in the country, one of the most sustainable cities in the U.S. At this point in time, governments are beginning to kind of question what the future looks like 5, 10, 15 years from now. And a lot of people, if I start to survey the room, probably have a lot of similar opinions about government, whether it's slow and bureaucratic and certainly inefficient and not as nimble. We, in my opinion, are kind of a rotary phone that's landline to the wall. And many of us, in fact, probably all of us in this room, are using wireless connected technologies in our day of life. So the question becomes, what does that look like from a government's perspective? How can we continue to grow our economy at the same time as providing jobs, enhancing the quality of life for people who live, work, learn, play here, and of course protect the environment for generations to come? And a really interesting analogy here is looking back to Easter morning, 1900, Fifth Avenue, New York City. It says spot the automobile. You can see that one circle. There's one Model T on Fifth Avenue, New York City, 1900. One Model T. And of course, thousands of horse and buggies going up and down this road. Different emissions probably, you can imagine. Moving forward to 13 years later, same street, Fifth Avenue, New York City, 1913, spot the horse. Not a single horse can be found in this image. The Model T and the automobile completely revolutionized how we were moving to and from. You can imagine at the time what governments were thinking about from a planning perspective. How are we going to move the amount of people that are coming to and from? So this is an analogy that has led us to essentially develop a new initiative in the mayor's office around smart cities. How can we combine our efforts around sustainability and the Greenworks Orlando program something that we've now done for the last 10 years, and embed a level of technology and information systems that will allow us to be effective as government, save taxpayer dollars, and again, drive economic growth and job creation, enhancing quality of life, and at the end of the day, protecting the environment. So that brings us to smart cities and our leadership team.
Yeah, so, it's this whole smart cities concept so huge. And actually, forget the label for a minute. This whole thing came out of many U.S. universities, Dr. Berkeley, all these schools. And then, like we've done in the U.S., we developed all these things, and people in Europe and Asia take them and they run with them, right? So, Dave, you're smiling over there, but that's what happened. So, we got cities all across the globe that have taken ideas that have come out of U.S. universities and other think tanks in the U.S. and cities like Barcelona, Tokyo, and so on, doing great things and putting the brand Smart City on them. And then we all started waking up and saying, wow, we need to do these things. We developed them right here. So the city of Orlando, we realized that to be that great city that is deserving of our international profile. We're an international city, right? To be deserving of our international profile, we need to be a smart city. But it's so big that we can't have any one person handle it. So we have a steering committee with people from different parts of the city. I'm an ITS, Intelligent Transportation System, Public Works guy. Chris, Director of Sustainability, Director of Public Works, Rick Howard, Chief Information Officer, Rosa, and Matt Groffman, Director of Innovation. Fleet Facilities, a big part of what we're doing. So we have a steering committee here in the city that is looking at this comprehensively.
I'd say in addition to the steering committee, we've identified points of contacts in every department and division across the city who are working on incorporating technology in our day-to-day operations. And those are the individuals who we're collaborating with, trying to find some cross-sector, cross-departmental collaborations to move our agenda forward.
So, Smart Cities Council is a group that we've been working closely with, and these have come from the Water Drivers of Smart City. Others across the globe agree on these. We have a growing urbanization. The whole world is moving to urban centers. A lot of stress associated with urbanization and what we do each day. Inadequate infrastructure. I've got a buddy who sends me stuff on what's happening in China every day, showing new infrastructure in China and how we're falling behind with our infrastructure. Growing economic competition. It's not just between Orlando and Tampa anymore, or between Orlando and Charlotte. It's between Orlando and maybe a region in Spain, a region in South Korea or something like that. That's the kind of competition we're having. Growing expectations. People are more knowledgeable about emerging trends and about lifestyles and so on. We have rapidly moving technological capabilities and rapidly declining costs, which is good in barriers. Lack of citizen stakeholder engagement. This is a huge one. We've got to get the citizen involved. They've got to know what we're doing from day one. They've got to buy in, and they give us cover. In Orlando, we wanted to do smart parking. We had a fight inside City Hall. Rick Howard, my ex-boss, and I were having our backs against the wall. People were saying, do smart parking, we're going to lose fine revenue from fines. It's going to bankrupt us. Guess what? We engaged the business community. They gave us cover. And you wouldn't believe it. The fine revenue has gone down, but with the smart parking, overall revenue has gone up. Nobody could believe what was going to happen. So, siloed and piecemeal implementations. We've got different departments doing things. We need to come together and look at how we can do things maybe 2 or 3 departments at a time and save money, have common approaches. Lack of financing is a big one. Lack of information communications technology. That's at the heart of this, right? That's the foundation of what we do. All right. Lack of integrated services related to siloed piecemeal one, and lack of smart city visionary. You've got to have at least one visionary. You've got to have someone who is holding the flag and saying, "Hey, this is where we're going. Follow me." Actions of smart city. So basic things. All right, there's 3 basic things. Just remember these. We're using ICT, that's information communications technology, foundation of everything a smart city does. We're collecting, we're communicating, and we're crunching. When we crunch the data, then we can do not just reactive stuff, we want to do predictive stuff, okay? So we want to archive and predict and progress. So let's run through this real quick. This just shows the different areas. We don't have enough time, so this is a big one, right? So the universal aspects of the city, the built environment, energy, to communications, all of these things are things that cities do across the top. And then the technology enablers. We need to bring these technology enablers to every one of these things, right? And the cities that are doing it best, like Barcelona and so on, and the one that's bringing the biggest money to this, Dubai, that's what they're doing, and they're seeing incredible results. So we've got to have community and digital inclusion. We've got to identify all our stakeholders, like I said before, have them continuously engaged, the business community, residents, local, regional, state, and federal, public and private sector groups, as well as nonprofits, and the vulnerable and underserved. And in Orlando, the biggest vulnerable group is tourist population, right? We get 68 million visitors per year, right? So we're a mid-sized city, about 275,000 population, about 1/10 of our urban area population. But we might be a lightweight, but we're punching like a heavyweight because we're a big city. We have 68 million visitors per year. That makes us a big city, right? So ICT, like I said, again, I keep saying it's a foundation. Orlando already has extensive fiber optic network internally for transportation, public safety. We got some regional partners that we're working with, CFX, FDOT, FT, great fiber networks. But we've got to make sure that we properly inventory and map these things, master plan these things for 2045, 2060, and that we improve them so that they're redundant, there's adequate physical security, there's cybersecurity, and there's interconnection between all. So some local guiding elements, zooming in, coming down from high elevation. With Greenworks Orlando, program that Chris manages, it's been running for 20 years, for 10 years. It's a sustainability program, one of the best in the country. Then 2012, this region got together and did something, a planning process called How Shall We Grow? It's largely on the shelf, but it was a good forerunner to what we're doing. And then the biggest catalyst of them all for the U.S., Separate Fox, who was mayor before that in Charlotte, at the U.S. DOT came up with the Beyond Traffic 2045 vision. Where are we going to be in 2045, right? That was the forerunner to the U.S. DOT Smart City Challenge, which spurred this whole smart city movement beyond transportation in the U.S. But Mean Streets and Dangerous by Design, publication done annually, claims that we are one of the worst metro areas in the nation for pedestrian safety. All right. Again, we have the world's largest tourist destination, lots of lost people, distracted driving, and so on. All right. And so those are the challenges that we need to face first, right? There are other challenges, but those are there. Those are among the guiding elements.
So essentially, as Charles has been mentioning, the city of Orlando has actually been working on a lot of smart type projects over the course of the last 2 decades. And we didn't realize that many of the initiatives that you see on here that we've been working on basically fell under this umbrella. And what the launch over the last year and a half of pulling this initiative together has basically made us aware that we need more collaboration amongst our departments around using technology to enable some of these sustainability initiatives. So I'm going to dive into a couple of these key areas that can give you an idea of what we're working in. On the smart public safety side, this is obviously near and dear. It's a significant chunk of the city's budget goes towards public safety, police, fire, emergency services. And what we've been trying to do is, first and foremost, enable an open data website, an open data portal, to allow for the data that is being collected to be available to the public, to data analytics, and to essentially provide some intelligence back to us. One of the things, if you go to our open data portal today, is that of everyone who's essentially going through our process, our arrest process in the city of Orlando, it shows everything from the demographic of the police officer to the individual, their age, where it was, the actual crime information, and I'll mention a couple of things later on today about what we need from that. In addition, we're in the process of rolling out now body-worn cameras and audio recording that will tie into our computer-aided dispatch for public safety. This is going to be one of the more sophisticated public safety infrastructure, basically frameworks or infrastructure in any city in the country. And we've actually been working with NYC on some of the, taking best practices from them. We have 178 what we call IRIS cameras around the city. These provide real-time information in certain hotspot and high crime areas. And in partnership with UCF, we're in the process of actually looking at how we can incorporate analytics into that to identify potentially individuals who are on FBI warrant lists and other criminals who may be in high priority here in our region. And lastly, one of the areas that I felt was important to show, and I know some of this technology is a bit out of date, but what we are starting to do is have our emergency vehicles, our police cruisers, our ambulances and fire trucks communicate with our intelligent transportation system to prioritize their journeys over others. So there is everything from GPS, infrared, and other technologies that are now being embedded on the vehicle as well as at the traffic signal to allow for a smoother, quicker response time to and from any kind of destination. So that's one of the areas we've been working in. Solid waste is critical to our overall sustainability initiatives. I often say humans are the only species on Earth that produce non-biodegradable waste. And we are essentially in a challenge in that as we look towards the future sustainability of our city, we won't be dumping this stuff into a hole. We're going to be seeing waste as a commodity stream. So we've been soon, in really the next couple of weeks, you'll be seeing in downtown the rollout of some infrastructure, some downtown recycling bins that will also have some smarts to them. So these are what's called big belly trash compactors. They have a couple of technologies. One is a solar powered compactor. The electricity provided on the solar panel on top helps to minimize the frequency of collection so that you can compact that waste. It's actually a 1-to-5 compaction ratio. And secondly, there's a volumetric sensor that is in real time collecting how full these bins are so that we can now optimize the frequency of collection and when we're picking them up. We're doing a lot of other interesting things. We've moved towards weekly recycling. Before it was every other week recycling. That's been a major uplift in our recycling diversion rates. And we're also looking at how we roll out mandatory recycling for both commercial and multifamily facilities. There's been a lot of complaints from people who live in apartments or even who work in office buildings, including this one, who don't have an ability to recycle. And that is something that we're currently exploring with a number of stakeholders. Here's an example of some of the big belly data that will be collected. And I was surprised to know that Lynx, about 5 years ago, rolled out over 200 of these big belly compactors in their service territories, primarily in some of the outskirts of their areas that are more infrequent. Energy and green buildings is also critical towards essentially our vision and our goals of being a smart, sustainable city. We currently produce most of our electricity is coming from fossil fuels. We realize that the transition towards a clean energy future is not only good for the environment and public health, but it's also an incredible economic driver. And Mayor Dyer has us trying to position Orlando as being the tip of the spear in that respect for the Southeast. How do we really create a marketplace that drives business development, job creation, and really investments into our region? So on the building side of things, we've been looking at how to use technology to essentially help us optimize and save money for the city and for taxpayers. And first and foremost, we have a requirement for any new building in the city to be built at a LEED Silver minimum standard. So everything from the Amway Arena to DPAC, our fire stations, our police headquarters are all above that LEED Silver standard. Secondly, we realized that investing in our buildings can actually save us a significant amount of money, but also make us some money. So we 2 years ago took out a $17.5 million municipal bond, a general obligation bond, and investing in 10% of our facilities, 55 buildings. Those facilities are getting everything from automation and control systems for the lighting and the HVAC and some plug load. They're also getting high efficiency LED modifications and some HVAC tweaks. And based on our reporting, we're expected to see about $2.4 million in annual electric cost savings. Right now, we've reached over 1.4 million based on just half of the money being deployed. So we're well on track to seeing that. The interesting thing is, of course, we have to pay that bond back. So we're taking half of that money and paying down the debt over 15 years, and the other half recycling it in a revolving energy fund to reallocate those funds to more improvements. So we basically created an in-house ESCO. All of that.
Beyond that, let me just say
Yes.
this. We're trying to make the business case, use this to make the business case to others throughout Central Florida to show them, okay, we're not just talking the talk, here's how it's done. You want to see our numbers, do it yourselves also.
Yep. Finance tools, all of that are being now available. This is the platform that the city of Orlando uses to bring all of that data from the sensors and the lights to the HVAC all the way down to a central database called Building OS. And this helps us in real time gather historic data, weather normalized data, and then of course the data from the sensors and our meters to basically help us optimize the energy and water consumption of these buildings and basically compare us from yesterday, even this time last year, and how we're performing overall. Street lighting is a major move in many cities to move towards 100% LEDs. We have a goal of being there by 2020, and thus far have about 60% of the street lights completely converted to LED technologies. Most of the areas that we have not touched are key corridors, are your downtown or your main streets, and we purposely kind of held off because we realized the technology in street lighting is progressing so quickly that we wanted to ensure that there was an ability for us to adopt it as we move forward. And just in this last year, we've seen amazing improvements in using the street light as a smart pole, essentially allowing up to 7 different technologies embedded into one pole. Everything from Wi-Fi to video surveillance, parking and traffic analytics, pedestrian analytics, even some that have what's called shot spotters, which are gunshot detectors to allow us to triangulate and identify areas and immediately communicate to the nearest police officer within that geographic scope. So we're looking at ways to deploy some of these in downtown, primarily in the Creative Village and the SCD, and see how these can improve overall. Energy production in general, I mentioned we have some goals, major goals recently made last month by Mayor Dyer and the council to move us towards 100% renewable energy by mid-century and municipal operations by 2030. How we're going to do this is, of course, a close partnership with OUC to ensure that we're cleaning up their production in terms of energy. And so we're looking at utility scale, we're looking at commercial rooftop, even some interesting floating solar systems. Part of getting there is understanding the technologies on the grid, the transmission and distribution grid, for us to allow for this two-way flow of electricity. Right now we've built for one-way flow of power, right? And this disruption of renewable energy and distributed energy resources is causing some concerns, of course, for traditional utility operators. So UCF actually received a grant earlier this year by Siemens to develop what's called the Digital Smart Grid Laboratory. And at their College of Engineering, they're essentially starting to simulate the UCF electric grid in real time. They have an on-site cogen plant, they have some solar, and then of course all of the buildings are hooked up with these sensors to see how much their demand is. And in real time, students are now starting to optimize that to see if we added 14 megawatts of solar, which is currently being considered at UCF, what does that do to our overall electric grid? How do we ensure 24/7 reliability? Or should we add storage where needed? And the idea is to scale that citywide over the course of the next few years. A couple of other things. So here's one of the new community solar farms that's going live this month. This is out by the Stanton Energy Center, which is off to your right here, off to the west. And for perspective, that's an individual there. And this is a massive solar array, and it's cool because this is what's called community solar. It will allow people who live in apartments or in office buildings to remotely tap into this larger community array and get upwards of 100% of their total electricity from renewables. There's a mechanism called virtual net metering that allows for that transfer of electrons. And then secondly, it's kind of looking at other creative uses, and this is a recent installation we did with OUC. It's a floating solar array on top of some stormwater ponds. This is a 35 kilowatt grid tied system, the only one in the southeast. And the idea is that we have thousands of these stormwater ponds not man-made lakes, they're not spring-fed, they're literally, completely, they're completely man-made holding ponds for stormwater, and could be, one of the challenges we face is a lot of the algae growth, right? There's a ton of algae that's being fed into these waters. We come then in there, spray a number of chemicals in order to kill out the algae, because nobody likes that, and it creates this feedback loop, this negative feedback. So instead, we're testing whether or not the floating solar can minimize on the amount of algae and therefore the amount of chemicals that are used, and also the biological kind of connectivity that it has with the systems there.
What are those able to power when they're in there?
The third, it's grid tied, so it goes right, it's fed right into the grid,
Okay.
just like somebody's solar ran on their house. We've been starting to do a preliminary analysis. There's about 10 megawatts of PV potential on just stormwater ponds. I mean, we're looking at the airport. There's mayor really is interested in seeing how, as you come on that autonomous tram and you hear him, you can kind of look at a real case of innovation in Orlando using this floating solar array. So we're kind of working through that. I'll turn it over to Charles about transportation.
We're in the 2-minute warning. It's
All right.
football season.
All right.
So we talked about traffic already, and we could go past this, but we need to bring that same spirit of innovation. Back late 90s again, right? We were having a problem downtown Atlanta. We had grown to the point where we had almost gridlock. And we were talking to USDOT about getting a grant to put in a circulator downtown. And we were looking at doing a vintage streetcar thing on rails and all. And it came up to about $80 million cost, and the USDOT said, you're acting as though you're spending somebody else's money. You need to act as though you're spending your own money. Go back and get creative. And we went back and came up with a project that was half the cost and was the first bus rapid transit project in our city, right? The limo system that runs around here that we now want to take a new. And so what we're looking to do with limo is make it electric. The first step is to make it electric. We see some electric vehicle bus testing here. Then the next step is we want to make it electric driver assisted. And the final step is electric and driverless. So we'll be doing some of the closed, and we'll be doing simulation and emulation at NASA, UCF, and down at Florida Polytech, and then closed environment testing at UCF and contracts on Polytech, and then open environment work at UCF here.
The other thing to note is that we realize the electrification of transportation is coming very, very quickly. We're trying to set up the infrastructure, the public charging infrastructure that's needed to support that type of growth. Currently, Orlando has about 350 public chargers in the greater MSA. We're actually in the top 10 cities per capita for EV chargers, and we're looking to deploy an additional 150 at different parks, venues, and other places around that town to encourage that type of move.
Smart parking, we talked about this before, and about, we here at the City of Orlando came up with this idea many years ago. At the ITS World Congress in 2011 in Orlando, we did demo projects, we never acted on it. Thank goodness others were watching. Disney has it, and then Disney Springs now, Florida Hospital's doing it, and then we're catching up to them. But we're glad that we kind of spurred the discussion.
One thing that most people don't realize is 500 of the 1,100 parking spots in downtown on-street parking actually have real-time parking pucks. So in the app, the parking app, you can pull up and see and identify exactly what parking spots are open, which ones are closed. Again, 500 of the 1,100 soon will fully deploy downtown and then integrate it into the parking garages, so you have this seamless experience of coming downtown and finding parking rather simply. In closing, we'll talk quickly about the proving grounds.
Yeah, so when we lost out on the USDOT's challenge, what we did is we decided that we wanted to win the next challenge. So we went and we studied Columbus, and we studied all the finalists. And we made sure, when we were confident that we were going to win this one, okay? And when we went up in March of this year to Michigan to see all the 10 winners present, at the end of the day, we were like doing this about ourselves. Because, so many others are focusing on just autonomous and on the car, right? We were focusing on a full range of automation that could be bicycles, peds, transit, freight, and we were looking at roadside things and all types of other things. So we felt we had the most comprehensive approach. Beyond that, we thought we had a very diverse team. Going from NASA KFC, they said to me, Charles, if we could put a rover on Mars, we think we can do an autonomous vehicle. So we had people like them. We have the universities. We are trying to play to our strengths. Central Florida is a home of simulation. We got to bring all those things in. And so at the end of the day, we realized that we learned from Columbus and the others, and we decided to address our challenges and bring a diverse team, research, simulation, emulation. Florida A&M and FSU looking over our shoulders, being mentored by us too. And then, do closed environment testing with the Turnpike Enterprise at Florida Polytech and at NASA KSC. Using CFX and FDOT, our regional partners, to help us with
As a test bed or features for some of these smart technologies. Of course, the downtown creative village, UCF Valencia campus, but also the sports and entertainment district that's being developed right across the street from the Amway Arena. We're very closely in touch with their team, with Panasonic, IBM, and others who are trying to make that a smart district. And back to, you can't have a smart city without smart energy.
Charles is going to be on a panel, and we're going to dig even deeper into transportation shortly. But the folks with the network infrastructure, Manny, Andy, Ron, the stand-in for Ryan, our Verizon fellow blew his back out this weekend, landscaping that palatial mansion we saw. Do we have the stand-in from Verizon? Matt? No? Okay, well, that's fine. I'll do that part. Last week I was privileged enough to be on a panel with Lonnie Ingram, the Vice President of Smart Communities for Verizon, and with AT&T as General Manager. Okay, so I want to just quickly Kevin, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming. My name is Kevin Kurz. I'm the wireless manager for Anixter. Been with Anixter for about 6.5 years. Manage all the distributed antenna systems for the region and what have you. And Anixter is a global distributor. We're in 56 countries. We think globally, but we perform locally. So we've been working very closely with Pete this year and a lot of people in this room to do our part.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Andy Kissenberth, Senior Vice President, Sales and Marketing for Summit Broadband. We're really, I think, the only competitor to the incumbents today. Everybody else has been rolled up. We've been in business for about 20 years. We've expanded our network beyond 700 acres or 700 square miles in Central Florida. We do have some assets in Southwest Florida as well, but we're really focused in hospitality in Central Florida and, of course, education and so forth.
Good morning, my name is Manny Vivar. I'm the president and founder of Hostan.com. We're a premier global data center infrastructure provider, actually homegrown here, but we've neglected the local market. We operate data centers in Brazil, Mexico, Colombia, and India. We pretty much power the cloud. The cloud is the underlying layer between the cloud is basically data center infrastructure. We started here in 2003, but not many people know about us, and we're about to finalize the final site plans of our new facility off I-4 between Lee Road and Maitland, and look forward to seeing how Orlando becomes even smarter. It's very near and dear to me. Moved here when I was 20 years old from being a student at Embry-Riddle. And it has turned me into a professional, and I'm just excited to be part of Orlando and its growth.
Great. Good morning, everyone. I'm Ron Domain. I head up technology business development for Deus Technologies. We are the active technology company for Tavistock. Tavistock's a global company, but you've probably heard of them around here as a developer of Lake Nona. 7,000 acres just southeast of the Orlando airport.
Terrific. So again, Verizon, I may ask you a question at the table back there, but this initial slide is a Verizon slide from one of the presentations from a couple months back. But what I want to put it up for is just the same, themes, right? Sustainability, livability, resiliency, and then what are we solving for, right? Better economic development, competitiveness, public safety, congestion, right? We all want to see that go away, and then a stronger infrastructure. So we define, right, when the smart city community, when they talk about infrastructure, a lot of times they're talking about the buildings and all the other pieces of infrastructure. So it's very important to talk to network infrastructure because we know that connectedness and connectivity is crucial. So what I want to do is just ask, I was going to ask the first question of Verizon. I'll ask Kevin, what we're really solving for in the network side of the business is capacity and coverage, right? We need bandwidth wherever we are, and we need as much as we want, particularly if we're 16 and we're sitting in a room with our parents, right? So, Kevin, you want to talk a little bit about what the movement is and what's going on to help facilitate?
Gary, a lot of you in the room remember getting your first cell phone. I was on the West Coast and I launched AT&T, which was Cellular One and T-Mobile. And if you think back to those days, it was all about just a voice call, right? Our lives have changed so much since then. I mean, if you went this morning and left your house and left your wallet, your keys, or your cell phone, you had to leave one thing. You're not going anywhere without your keys. Maybe you could take an Uber. If you did not get your wallet, you could pay on Apple iPay. So our lives have changed so much. It's all about capacity. What is not densification? I mean, anybody that has kids in this room, have you ever taken a moment to count the devices in your own home? A family of 4 might have as much as 15, 20 devices. And it's all about capacity, as Pete said. So the amount of data throughput that we need, not only in our smart cities, but also in our smart buildings, our public venues, even the commercial building here in downtown Orlando, has to be a bring your own device technology so that the workers that come into that building can use any frequency, any day, any time. And I think we've seen a lot of that just proliferation of all the data that needs to happen. Falcons' first game was a few weeks ago, close to 7 terabytes at that game. That was an Annixter system that we put in, Strid antenna system. Just amazing, and people will just continue to gobble it up. Those data levels are going to continue to increase.
So we're going to talk to the full heterogeneous network topologies that are going into building these networks. But here, homegrown, Andy just talked, but I've got a picture of this regional network, right, that takes us over the coast, which this route is literally with swampland and very little communications. So Andy, you want to talk a little bit about how Summit developed in the area and the demand on capacity?
So about 8 years ago, we started out as Orlando Telephone Company. We rebranded that called Summit Broadband. We started out with about 65 route miles, mostly going up and down the international corridor. All of our growth, at least from a fiber standpoint, has been success-based. So we don't go out there and just build and hope that they come. So all the other hundreds of miles that we put in are all based on contracts, real demand, real requirements. So we've expanded the network from 65 route miles to almost 500. We largely covered Orange County, Osceola County, Seminole, and Lake. We're going to probably add a couple hundred extra miles in Lake County in the years to come, near term. We're seeing demand, bandwidth. We all see it, the demand going up, and it's not just people, because we do serve most of the resort and convention centers. You bring a lot of people in, you gotta have a lot of bandwidth there, but it's also the machines in places like Manny's facilities. So, it's coming from both ends.
So, your network goes to UCF, right? You
Yep,
power them over there as well as a lot of the facilities around. So, what type of capacity are you looking at now in the routes? And when someone comes to you and asks for a new connectivity, what are you starting to see in terms of bandwidth requirements?
So about 8 years ago, when we started our big launch, most people were going from below 10 to 20 megs. You get to 100, that was kind of a high mark at that point in time. Now it's not uncommon just to start with a gig, and of course it goes up from there. We have 100 gig DWDM capacity, so it's pretty much sky's the limit, and all the manufacturers are happy to sell us more equipment to lock that up. You know, we probably have the least intelligent part of the network. We just go out and build a bunch of infrastructure, put some fiber in the ground. There is some strategy behind that. You gotta make sure you put enough conduit in, because you won't have to be rebuilding it. We usually go under 3 pipes, and then usually put in at least 144 count fiber or higher. And we're actually finding ourselves 8 years forward, we're now starting to tap into that last conduit. So, there's major growth out there.
So when you look at network infrastructure, right, so you've got to have a strong base of fiber optics throughout the community. But then what's often ignored is the data center capacity, because a lot of folks just kind of think that bandwidth appears, but it takes a tremendous amount of equipment, a tremendous amount of coordination, and a tremendous amount of interconnection. So, Manny, you want to talk about how you develop and really what's going on at your centers?
Yes, we push about 23 gigs of traffic on actual peak time out of this facility right now in the corner of Eatonville and Maitland. So just imagine basically how all these applications, and I'll walk you through a scenario right now. Zayo is one of our clients, and they're largely, one of their largest clients is T-Mobile. So anybody who has T-Mobile here, who actually gets an email on your phone right now, it's actually traveling to a nearest cell tower from here. From there, it's tapping onto fiber, something that Summit probably controls here in the area, and then it goes into our facility. From there, it hops onto the public internet, routes to wherever the email came from or the call is going to, and then goes to a cell tower there, and then out to wherever. You get what I'm saying here is that basically everything that's connected, through Verizon or in the cloud, it's all underlying through basically physical data center assets. And the good thing is that back in the day, the latency didn't matter. You could be at a data center, wherever in the world. But what we're noticing is basically putting more edge infrastructure closer to where it needs to be delivered is actually more important nowadays. And we're not just seeing this locally here. We actually have data centers, like I said, in South America heavily. And what we're noticing is a lot of municipalities and a lot of clients are opting to host their infrastructure more locally now because of that latency reasons. But the tremendous amount of data that powers through all this, it's just enormous, and it's echoing what he had mentioned, that just the data is just growing. We see it through our graphs. We see it all coming in through the facility. But obviously large companies like Facebook, they run their own data centers, but not every company's a Facebook. And what we're going to continue to see is that the need to basically deliver this type of infrastructure locally is just going to be equally as important.
All right, so building these hubs are crucial, and Andy, you guys are building out a lot to the towers as well, right? You get huge demand for that?
We do. It's highly competitive, and some of the providers now have gotten smart enough to want to go out and do it on their own. So we got in early, helped us grow our network. We don't see a lot of that coming from them in the near term. But yeah, there's major growth there.
Right, so you're hearing, literally one company that operates here, Crown Castle, went out and they operate towers, right? So they started to go ahead and you see Verizon's chart here, where the macro is the towers that's covering the blanket, but now you've got to densify, and you need small cells, basically bringing the antennas closer to the user so that you can get more capacity and better coverage. So we're seeing that movement. But Ron and the folks at Lake Nona were kind of ahead of their time. They're a great example of putting together a partnership to meet the needs of their real estate development, as well as what they saw as the demand. Remember, silence your cell phones. As far as that demand. So, Ron, you want to talk about the master plan at Lake Nona and when you started and kind of how that's matured?
Sure. Well, Lake Nona, it's been around for quite some time. It started off as kind of a getaway golf community for the Brits that wanted to come over. So the country club part of Lake Nona was up near the airport. It's a 5-minute drive from the airport. And then, Mr. Lewis, who owns Tavistock, he purchased a lot of land, I think it was in the late 90s. And it really started kicking in probably about 2007. And if you ask the marketing folks what the mission is to inspire human potential. which, I think that comes down to three things. Health and wellness, sustainability, and education. So along those three areas, I think Lake Nona is best known for medical cities. So out there we have the Nemours Children's Hospital, UCF College of Medicine, Sanford Burnham Research Institute, UF also has their College of Pharmacology and Institute of Aging. And then Guidewell just put in, which is Florida Blue, they just put an innovation center in there. So we have a lot around medical. And then we just kind of took that to the next level with our sports performance cluster. So you may know that USTA located their national headquarters there. So there's 110 tennis courts there. USPTA just put their national headquarters there. USTA Florida just put their headquarters there. So we're starting to do the high performance. And there's a lot of DNA around that Lake Nona. We have a number of athletes in the club and just associated with Lake Nona. So that's on that health and wellness side. And then we're also taking that into community too. We do a lot around health and wellness in the community. Sustainability, structurally we set aside 40% of the land for preservation. And then, I work with Chris constantly, to make sure we are, contributing to and taking advantage of the Greenworks programs, Chris and John had before. And then around education, we have K through stethoscope, as we like to call it. We have kindergarten all the way up to the UCF College of Medicine. Valencia has a campus there, and I think most of you know they were rated the #1 community college in the country. But underpinning all that, making it work, is we have two things. We have technology, and this really kicked off, if you think about, it's in 2009 when Google was looking for the, looking to award the Google City. There was a major commitment by Tavistock to just do that on their own. We didn't wait for Google. We did that in partnership with Summit Broadband, and we'll talk a little about that. And also we have, you have to connect all the tissues. So we have the Lake Nona Institute, which has 3 aspects to it: education, health and wellness, sustainability. Because sometimes you just need, not everything has a business model, and you have to have the resources and time and the attention to get some of these things done.
So Ron, what's really unique, you said we'll touch on the partnership with Summit, but you address multiple network types, right? You didn't just say, hey, we need fiber or we need a tower. Talk about, how you chose network infrastructure as such a critical element.
So, I think it all started off with a pathway. So down the central spine of Lake Nona, we have a 86-inch conduit duct bank. So a very robust duct bank down the middle of Lake Nona. And then it is a natural part of any development discussion to talk about the conduit and the pathways for the fiber. And then as we talked about the fiber and the services, that's when we, talked to a number of providers. And then we, sat down with Summit Broadband and we said, we want to, it was really evolving, and we wanted to set a high bar for this. We wanted to have a certain amount of control, but we knew it wasn't a core competency of ours. And Summit came to the table and said, we'll do this as a partnership. And I think that was, how it kicked off. And we were able to start launching gigabit communities with video, and I think, our marquee community is like $84 a month for gigabit and video. That was in fiber. So then, on top of that, cellular, we have built 3 towers on our property, and we worked with all the carriers to participate. They're forced to, well, Verizon didn't speak to it, but you're driven by demand. So they've come on the towers as this tower, that coverage is needed. The immediate one is around USTA, where there's a lot of activity right there, and we have all the carriers on that tower. But they've also participated in our DAS system, and we have a DAS system that supports Nemours, UF, UCF, and the VA, all on the same central system. We all have all the carriers on it. We have a unique system, and if you can imagine the negotiations and the business model on that was very complicated. We had great support from the carriers on that.
I'll just add one thing. We did tie in a point of presence, so kind of back to what Manny's model is. Everything comes back to a central location. Of course, there's dual routes going in and out of this. There's power redundancy and so forth. But those come back to a centralized point, and it's the rest of the world.
I think the one thing we haven't done yet is a data center, because if you can get access to really robust facilities like Manny, it doesn't make sense. We're trying to focus on what our core competencies are, and companies like CoStar, that's what you do, and you do it very well. So we just provide access to that.
Yeah, and since Summit actually has fiber in our facility and they're there, it's literally less than a millisecond type of latency at this, local level.
But yet, Ron, you created, I guess it was 4 huts, if you would, within the tower infrastructure. so that your tower clients could put a lot of their gear at the base, is that right?
Yeah, so at the point of presence that David was talking about, we have a caged area where they each brought in their trailers, and so they can actually bring in 2 different signals, one for the DAS system and then another one for the tower.
So let's talk about DAS for a second, because part of the goal of this group is to talk about what are the core network types, right? So I had a previous slide up with the cell tower, and then to the right, we'll go back and talk about IoT type networks. But right now, DAS has been a huge driver of getting antennas closer to the user, both outside and in building. Kevin, you want to talk about a little bit about DAS specifically and what it does in buildings?
Sure. You know, we started out about 15, 20 years ago with amplifiers and a Yagi antenna on the roof of this building, and we realized pretty quickly with the carriers that we weren't bringing any capacity. We were just solving for bars on phones. We were giving people voice. You know, you don't really drop a call in an elevator these days. At least I haven't in quite a long time. And the problem for the carriers was we were just tapping into that macro tower and taking coverage and taking, you know, not doing anything for capacity. So over the course of the last, 10 years, and Peter was mentioning Crown Castle, the carriers decided to work with these tower firms, and they did reverse auctions for the tower companies to come in. A lot of your universities here in town have tower-funded towers that they've now gone back to the T-Mobiles and Verizons of the world and charge them to plug in. Problem with that is it's really become an enterprise spend. The carriers are interested in those large public venues that are, to me, a finite number, right? And when you do put a system in, you're going to have 5G somedays. You're going to have to continually upgrade it. So where DAS has come more into a fiber world is that carrier can actually bring the base transceiver station through fiber to your MDF closet and actually have a system of spatially separated antennas that actually give you that good 5-bar signal within a structure. Chris and Charles had mentioned about safety for the city, but they also mentioned that they're going to be doing a lot of buildings that are going to be LEED certified. 97% of the LEED structures that are going to go up will not propagate within 15 feet of the windows and doors. So we need to be thinking about this.
Why is that, Kevin?
Architects need to be thinking about it because of the line of sight. You also have metal fibers within the glass. The steel post 9/11 is very strong. So the densification of our structures, the facade of the building, is keeping a lot of that signal from getting in. So we need to get that signal in the building and then propagate it throughout. We also are now, as of last week, there's a lot of debate going to be talking about in-building gunshot detectors. Whenever you hear a city talk about gunshot, it's always in an external environment, a university, a downtown metroplex, right? We now need to be thinking about gunshot detection within a building. And all these things can now be put on the DAS through single mode fiber. Anything IP, any analytics can be done. And that was just done at Falcon Stadium. You have wait lines for the concession stands on your app, ways to get into the particular parking on your app, bathroom wait lines, just it goes on and on. The analytics of the companies that are going to be in downtown Orlando, the commercial properties, are going to want to work closely with the city to make sure that that signal gets in their building. Because if we don't have the connectivity, everything else falls down.
Okay, so we touched on in buildings, right, so DAS, and then small cells is a smaller flavor, if you would, of the DAS. But there's multiple networks servicing us, right? So Kevin referenced the low-E glass that's going on through sustainability. Chris is hurting the wireless guys, but helping the DAS guys. So, so thank you, Chris, for my DAS clients. But with that, Ron, how about Internet of Things and sensors and that sort of development? Are you looking at that now? Is that something that's part of your growing plan?
So we are definitely starting to look at that. And I say starting for a couple of, well, one, we feel like we have the infrastructure layer below it. And then our approach to IoT is it's constantly changing, and what we talk about now is going to be different in 6 months. And, to a certain extent, we're project-based. So it started out with Medical City, then we went to USDA, and then I think Vancouver to KPMG, that's going up. And we have these big projects that typically tend to come in. Our next one is Town Center, which is going to be over 1 million square feet. That'll start in the next couple months. So now we're really starting to dig into what sensors and what logic and what applications we put on top of that. What data can we collect? How do we share that data across not only our businesses, but our residents and our guests and our employees as well?
So yeah, I just put up a slide showing some of your growth, and your numbers probably changed. This is a few months old there.
Yeah, the other thing I'll add is that by default, we're a developer, so everything we do has to have an ROI, at least, if not currently, in the foreseeable future. So historically, I think a lot of IoT has been, on promises, and what we're trying to do is, and it's starting to get real tangible business cases around, and specific use cases that we can leverage when we go to get funding for these projects.
So talk a little bit more about, how you operate the partnership, Andy and Ron, how you put this together, and, how you continue to grow. What is the sustaining drive there?
So you want to start?
Well, I'll say it started off with a joint venture between, so we have a joint venture called Deus Communications, which is half Summit Broadband, half Deus Holdings, actually. And for the most part, we bring in the clients and we use, this network as a selling point, and Summit Broadband operates it for us. They have core competency.
Yeah, we came in with the skill, the knowledge, the experience. We're already running networks. For us, we knew that probably one of the only ways to really get into the Lake Nona community itself was to really partner with them. If we came in with a standard service offering, we would be put on the table with the rest of them. The other ones are, the 800-pound gorilla. It's really hard to, go against that. So we figured, all right, let's just go in this jointly. We've got 250 employees. We draw on about 150 of them right here. We've got our own technicians, our own trucks. We have our own call center, so it was just a logical fit for the partnership to plug in everything that we already do, and then take their vision and plug that in. Tavistock does a great job of really pushing us to excel and deliver an excellent service, so it's worked out really well.
So I'll give you two specific examples of how it's worked. So we had a community out there called Somerset, and you hear a lot about over the top, people are only going to want internet. So we sat down with them and came up with an offering that's in the HOA. You either get 250 megabits, or you get 100 and video. And just, so we can gauge what the market's doing. And then in our new 8-story apartment building, it's going to start out all internet.
Go vertical.
We are.
Wow,
I would
exciting.
also just add, last year, Vince, we were down, we went through the smart homes. I would encourage anybody that hasn't been out to Lake Nona Smart Home, get some friends together and go tour that thing and really open your mind to what's coming technology-wise.
And we're going to expand on that in just a couple of minutes. But in that same regard, smart cities, you're starting to see more and more cooperation. Verizon, the folks in Sacramento signed a master service agreement with you guys to help them look at their entire smart city infrastructure, right? So you're starting to see some sort of more and more collaboration. And this was an early model at Lake Nona, but the growth has been, it's a winner for both groups, right? No question about it.
It's great when you have a lot of vacant land and you're in the business of providing both commercial, residential, and carrier wholesale business, and it kind of feeds itself. You do have to wait for that payback window. It's a little bit elongated than what we're used to, but yeah, it's great.
Right, but then it's sustainable, right?
Sustainable.
Yeah, that's right. So when we do these events, we talk about the network densification, right? Because you have the marriage of the capacity, which is what the coverage, which we used to be concerned about most, but now it's the capacity as well, to keep our 16-year-olds staring into the phone. But it varies across the different type of urban settings. But your coverage models, as I said, the DAS and small cell are densifying, right? They're bringing antennas closer. You have the macro, which is the blanket, right? Which is where 5G is going to address across all of this. You have Wi-Fi in city pockets. Chris, you guys operate some Wi-Fi? Yep. Right. So you have citywide. When I was in Philadelphia, they did the first wireless network, and they did it, from a more from the soft side, if you would. They didn't think about the technical, and they outsourced. And I had done some work with them, and I told them they were going to fail, and I was there when they did. It was really the short-sighted. They didn't think about what it took to really operate that, nor did their partner think about what that growth curve was going to look like. Within a year, Earthlink was looking for all their returns, and it was just still putting the signs up on buses and street poles. So in any case, the thinking is the city has to understand that this infrastructure is like its fourth utility. A building owners got to focus on this as a fourth utility, or else you're not going to lease up. Here in the United States, this is about a year old, but if you can see, we lag far behind South Korea and Hong Kong and a number of other countries in terms of what the average throughput that we offer our citizens are. Yet when you look at Lake Nona and what Summit and the Tavistock people put together, they offer a gig of service. That's sort of the light bulb, right? And then if you look at the development of those hospitals with all the imaging and all that work, it doesn't happen without that fiber being readily available. So a very important driver. We're seeing, Kevin touched on Atlanta, but to give you an example, 2 years ago at the Super Bowl, combined between Wi-Fi and distributed antenna systems propagating cell signals inside the venue, 27 terabytes of data was passed. Last year's both venues were about 72,000 people. 35% growth in the amount of bandwidth. They actually needed to use 2 cellular propagation, 2 DAS systems, as well as a public safety system to propagate those radios. So you can see that this is our, in the industry they call it the data tsunami, right? You heard that, and many houses have. So Manny, what is the growth like inside the data centers? I mean, you're just printing money now, aren't you?
Wish it was that easy. No, obviously, you know, we talk about content, right? So what is all this data that's basically being pulled out of these venues? It's basically all the social media, all the data, all the content, videos being sent. So that's a lot of data. And we're not talking email type of data or text type of data. We're talking videos, 4K now going to mobiles, massive amount of resolution.
Live.
Yeah, and it's all streaming live. Yes, I mean, all that data has to basically content has to pass through infrastructure just to get to the other user's endpoint. So you can imagine how this data just flows so fast, and you know, it's basically become an on-demand thing. You know, it just goes. You know, so but it's all the media, you know, that comes, you know, from everybody basically trying to share.
And as you're planning, right, inside your new facilities, you've got to devote more and more space. You've got to be thinking about this. Where are the risers? Where's the entry points, right? There's a really cool building in town that actually worked with Andy to try to build fiber in, and had the risers facing the railroad tracks, and the city wouldn't let us come in through the newly paved street. So you had to deal with a railroad crossing, and these sort of things thought out in advance save a lot of dollars and a lot of time, because these facilities are crucial and they cost a lot to build in. But the other driver is going the other direction, low bandwidth, right? So much of what Chris is driving in these buildings, it's just little sensors that just need to send back a kilobit or two, right, every day, and then a machine analyzes that and gives you a dashboard or gives you a report, or actually the drive now is that the machine actually learns and goes ahead and makes all the changes that a person would, right? So as long as you keep it powered, you're in good shape. Manny, during the hurricane, what was it like to keep power going? Generators?
Well, there's no option. I mean, you have to be up, and you know, obviously that's why you build all this resiliency and this infrastructure. That's what makes really a data center. Data center is just the design, the reliability built into it, where literally, and you hear this term all the time, where a second is, you know, could be billions of dollars, you know, and how reliable the infrastructure has to be. So yeah, for us, you know, hurricanes has to mean another day, and we've been through 7 of them, obviously, and you know, we're fortunate enough that we stayed up in all of them. But you plan for this, you build for this. This is what, you know, expertise is for data center providers, and you know, it's good to know that, you know, we have one ready for the local market, and but you know, that's what they're built for, and you know, we've done a great of a job there doing that, and you know, we look forward to continue doing that.
So, you know, a lot of this infrastructure is not necessarily household names. Obviously, Verizon and AT&T and Sprint, Mike, where'd Mike go? I neglected to point. Oh, there we go. Mike and Sprint. You know, you guys are building massive infrastructure that on the macro level, and then this race for densification is occurring, right, at the street level, and street furniture and smart ways to work with the city to deploy this. But now we come back to the home again, right? So we've got a gig at the home. We've got beautiful 5G networks are coming, and they've got more bandwidth coming. So now it's that, how do we apply it and make life better, right? Increase quality of life. So let's just touch again on WIT. I know we all want we're there, we want that big table with the touch screen, that's pretty cool. But Ron, talk about WIT and like from a health perspective and sustainability perspective, what that's up to.
Sure, so, going back a little bit, I talked about the main initiatives of Lake Nona, it's wellness, health, sustainability, and education. And about 5 years ago, Cisco Live did a trade show here, and what they did was they bussed about 80 to 120 people over to Lake Nona, and they said, hey, set something up for us, because one of the things, we are Cisco's first iconic city in the US, and so we did that. We took a model home, we totally geared it out. The tours came through, loved it, and then they left. And then we had to take everything out of the home, and then there goes the experiment. So one of the things we always talk about is having a living lab is how do you advance some of these things, and that's one of what the Institute's there for. So in addition to building homes and real estate, we need to advance some of these technologies. So we set up the Institute, we said let's have a permanent demonstration home, that's what the WIT is for, and we do it in partnership with several corporations. We had GE was an early partnership, J&J, Florida Blues in there. There's a couple others I'm forgetting right now. Oh, UCS is a big partner, David Metcalf. They're actually curating the back two garage, the property. And it's really geared to be, have an ongoing living lab. So the other day we had the CEO of Nemours there talking, sitting around the table going, God, it'd be great for kids' health if we did this, this, and this. And that, that's the whole part about it. It's an effort on our part, it's an effort on our partners, but you just need to have that table that everybody gets around, a place that everybody gets around and installs things, evaluates them, and looks at them.
Well, this is going to be that little table at lunchtime. We're going to facilitate more of that discussion because that's exactly the point of what we're trying to do at Dense Networks is put smaller groups together, get some level of frequency, but to get you in the room and chatting across disciplines. And it's amazing what you see get solved there. I know Stan has done some work with the guys up from Massachusetts, and you guys do that around the country as well. You maybe we'll talk about that later. But with WIT, that's the last piece of here. If you want, anybody want to expand?
I will add one more thing. The great thing about it is we're building homes. So Deus, we build out 40 homes a month. We do all low voltage for 40 homes a month. We can set the standards. Like for instance, on sustainability, every new home has an outlet for EV charger in the garage. All the homes meet first scores of 68. So, and we have another several thousand homes here to build, and then we have our whole Sunbridge project, which is about 30,000 homes between here and the Space Coast. So this is a great place to try things, to set standards, to advance the standards, and really take the next level, and also implement it.
Has anybody been out there? Who's been? I'm sure David. Okay, I highly recommend, I don't know how you arrange, I know next year we're going to try and come back if you'll have us. I know Kevin caused some damage.
I loved it.
But yeah, it was really fascinating, and maybe we could do an autonomous vehicle out there, non-city oriented. So with that,
I do want to introduce, I have a colleague back there, Ron Matson. He's in our business development department, so he can also help arrange tours or just work for me.
Well, we were happy. Ron signed up independent.
Who does it?
Well, we like that. Well, we appreciate it. So again, we're trying to bring the groups here that are all doing really cool stuff. We just don't always hear about it. So this group, any final thoughts, Kevin?
Just I think in the last 3 years, we've seen so many things happen with cities like Orlando. Orlando's been at this a lot longer than 3 years, but it's coming together at events like this. We're getting a just disparate grouping of people. I think it was Charles that mentioned silos. So when I work every morning when I woke up and I'm talking to end users about in-building DAS or smart cities, smart buildings, it's amazing to me how the commercial building owner and the people that are in those buildings don't talk within inner departments. One of the national labs in Tennessee I met with about a year ago, and I walked in and all the C-levels were there and nobody was giving me any attention. I was supposed to present to them. And they were all looking at their phones and thinking, what, am I with my 15-year-old? What's going on here? And I said, excuse me, gentlemen, if I could please have your attention. Why am I here? Do you know why I'm here? So yeah, you're here to talk to us about DAS and we don't have any money. And I asked them one simple question, if they had a life safety committee. And they said they did. I got on the back phone right there and I called up to the guy that managed the life safety committee. He had $350,000 for Oak Ridge National Laboratory that he had to spend for 3 weeks. And he was happy to share it with them. So it was like an epiphany for me, because I thought, if more people within commercial buildings in the city of Orlando can talk, it would be the catalyst to learn more about these
And
technologies.
the reason the life safety guy cared is because your DAS system was going to provide the bandwidth, but it was also going to propagate the police and fire
He's
ratings,
an expert public safety responders.
right? So that in some towns, you won't get a CO if they can't get that radio to work, right? And I'm sure it's here as well. So you need a DAS system that for public safety, and I'd say 85 to 90% of the time it's not planned in advance. So you've got to rip out things, put antennas in. So anyway, thanks, Kevin. Andy, any final thoughts?
We're just, very excited and happy about what's going on in Orlando. We're headquartered right here. We're, here to partner with everyone, anybody that, we can help, we're willing to do. So please give us a call.
I wanted to thank Pete for organizing this. Honestly, the timing couldn't have been any more perfect. I think to talk about this and getting people together. I think with technology evolving so fast, we tend to forget. Because technology is the World Wide Web. It's global, literally. You're in a global market, but we tend to forget our localness. And I'm excited for it. I'm excited to be part of Orlando. I feel like this is. I was born here, even though I wasn't, but, more importantly, I feel that no matter how much technology evolves, one thing will never change. We'll always be humans, and having this local of network and connectivity should be amplified, and, I just wanted to appreciate that.
Well, thanks, Billy. I'm glad you could join us. And Ron?
Well, the only thing I'll add in addition to thanks to you is thanks to Charles and Chris, because, the city does a lot here that, Lake Nona and others just take advantage of, so I just wanted to thank you.
Terrific. Jim Thomas is in the back, and I know he's got to run off.
I'm
You'll
good.
be able to stay?
Yeah.
Oh, terrific. I'm going to let you talk. We'll give you a lunch back.
No, it's good.
So I want to thank everyone. Jason Eichenholz is going to come up and he's going to speak to you about what I think is probably the most exciting company, definitely in the Orlando region, if not one of the most exciting companies in the United States right now, Luminar. So with that,
here's something a little bit different category of smart cities. All right, so who here has heard of Luminar? Okay, more than I expected.
It's not the film on the windshield, is it?
Well, I don't know. We're just talking about bandwidth. Huh?
There we go. Yeah. Actually, Jason, I was chatting with one of our economic development people about Luminar. That's what they thought. There's a windshield film that has a similar name. And I said, no, this is
It's called something else. But
great stuff.
okay, so smart cities. Part of the deal with smart cities, and this is going to be interactive. So if you want to talk, I only have a few minutes to speak, so I'll try to go through a lot of stuff really quickly. But kind of a hot thing now.
I have one.
You have one? What do you have?
Tesla Model S.
Okay, we're going to talk about that. Okay, so not quite. We had another discussion with you about the Tesla, what it can and cannot do. Because if you don't use it right, I don't want people to die. So this is operating safely is pretty important. So I'll talk about autonomy and requirements and talk about what we do as well. Are we videotaping this?
if it's okay.
I prefer not. Thank you.
Economics, so we have projects on spectrum sharing. In the spectrum community, spectrum management wireless community, there's a significant trend in the last 5 years primarily that this spectrum, which is a precious natural resource, needs to be shared in some way. Obviously, it's a very challenging thing to do. So in one of the projects that what we're doing is we're looking at how we can make operators as well as the end users share the resources, spectrum resources, as much as they can. And how we can use maybe government policy to incentivize the sharing even further. How we can do device-to-device communications, and how we can improve the sharing between the end users. The other kind of work relevant would be also how do we respond to disasters. We just got a new grant from NIST. It's a new program NIST started about public safety. I forgot the full name of the program, but it's about essentially innovation for communication infrastructure for public safety.
Do you remember how many zeros were?
The total size of the project is 1.2 million. I think our share was something like 300,000. We have enough money. It's for my group. I'm very fortunate with that. But the point I was going to get to was I think that there's significant amount of interest in how do we respond to major events, disasters, emergencies. How do we leverage wireless as well as wireline connectivity for handling and responding to these type of big events? How do we make our reliability less dependent on the infrastructure, communication infrastructure? Although, I mean, arguably one of the, during the last 2 hurricanes, we've seen that communication infrastructure was really strong. Still, the cellular, base stations seem to be the sort of, one of the things still survive through the hurricanes. Still, the interest, there is significant interest on what if those infrastructure points are not available, what can we do? So because of that, I spent quite a bit of my effort recently on the device-to-device communications and networking. So those are some of the efforts. In addition to that, I know there are several other professors like Dr. Abdelati, who does a lot of work in connected vehicles, and also Dr. Fella in our department. He also joined at the same time as me, and he's leading with, again, connected vehicles work. And beyond that, Dr. Chatterjee is also doing what we call as cognitive radio. Again, highly relevant to the context of IoT and connected vehicles. Keep talking.
Terrific. Well, Dean, you're down there.
Yeah, I'm on the other side of the railroad track.
Yeah.
The good side of the
But you've got right there on your campus, you've got this proving grounds, and so I've seen drone footage. It's real. Talk a little bit about what you're working on and what's going on down there at Florida Polytech.
Sure. Florida Poly is a project-based university. So basically that means I don't put up PowerPoint slides and lecture to my students. A lot of the professors don't anymore. I don't mean to indicate they do, but we give them project-based problems like build your own autonomous vehicle, build a solar-powered golf cart, build a autonomous bicycle with mechanical engineers to figure out how could that be used. That's funded by HARP, Hillsborough Transportation System. There's a gentleman who did an investment in solar-powered golf carts for the underprivileged and the elderly community. So the way we look at it is, well, let's not study the atom just to study the atom. Let's have a problem and get together with an industry like Luminar to solve it with existing technologies. And as you solve that problem, you will uncover new technologies. You will uncover new problems with the integration of energy, the integration of size, what are the limitations that come about. So I'm very hands-on, proactive with give me a problem with the industry. Let's work together. My students are brilliant. They're very excited. I love millennials. I know some of you don't, but I love millennials. Give them a problem, get out of their way, and help them. In addition, as you mentioned, we've got SunTrax, which is really exciting. You've got to test these technologies somewhere. I know a lot of it can be done virtually in simulation, but there's got to be somewhere where you can integrally test these, like M-City. Well, the city of Florida Department of Transportation, in conjunction with the toll technologies, is building a 2.25-mile SunTrax facility. There it is right there. Look at that. It broke ground June 9th, June 10th. It's going to be about 600 days. $100 million project. It's fully funded. Thank you for driving on the toll roads. It's fully funded. But they are designing the interior to have almost like Disneyland. They have different lands that you could actually, as a company, reserve. You can make it snow in Florida. You can make it rain in Florida. You can have terrain in Florida. You can actually have high-speed on and off ramps to integrate your technologies or to test your technology. You can also have the Hollywood Studios, so that if he wanted to take it and make it downtown Las Vegas today, but tomorrow he wants it to be Montana, he could have a system where he could put out what he wants to test his LiDARs with. So it's pretty cool. We hope to have our students also engaged in testing, validation, and verification, because that's going to be a big scope for our students too.
And when, Charles, when we were at Smart Cities Week, I think you were the M City.
I wasn't in that section, but I've been up there.
You know, so they talked a lot about how they collaborated with the city of Ann Arbor to do that. What are you looking at? I mean, obviously we have this proving grounds, and you're certainly attuned to that. But anything going on in the city in terms of autonomy?
Well, yes, we're about to test one of those little autonomous shuttles. But we want to test it first out at UCF, make sure it's all fine there before we bring it to the open environment downtown. We're planning to use it to run on the limo system here, and also from here over to the Orlando Magic games. You know, our role is to be like the dreamer, the visionary, that sees, that imagines the wonderful figure in a block of marble, and then to get all these sculptors to come, and not just to sculpt that figure out of the marble, but to make that figure come to life. So we're trying to, you know, facilitate and catalyze and bring all these elements together, bring all these partners together, attract talent, create an ecosystem. But yes, we have a vision to have one of those shuttles out at UCF soon. We believe in that type of environment, people will accept them a whole lot better. We have great academics out there to help test them, do reports on them, check them out before the public then will feel confident and comfortable enough to try them in open environments.
Yeah, well, it makes me a little bit nervous myself, but you know, when you listen to the experts, there's ramifications for public safety, there's ramifications for quality of life. David, what are you driving towards, and what are some of the major initiatives? You know, how are you bringing it home?
Yeah, sure. So a few years ago, we got a grant from the Florida Department of Transportation to build a self-driving car simulator. So it plays like a video game that you keep your hands off of. And really the whole idea was what they call constituent sentiment. You know, if the technology's ready, but the population's not, how do we bridge that gap? How do we make sure that the humans, whether they're 15 years old going for the driver's license or 80 years old, never seen this type of thing, and anyone in between, is ready for this? That's kind of the human-in-the-loop technology that is going to be necessary no matter what level the technology is up in your chart there, too, for us to be able to do that. We also have a small fleet of Teslas available and have other vehicles coming into the network of test beds that we're able to bring in and bring online to do some next level testing too. And then from there, we want to have a partnership and some nice handoffs to actually test this out within the community too. I know, NASA's been a great partner for us too, and we're also talking about SunTrax once it comes online too. And using the various technologies to be able to test them in that profile, whether they're connected vehicle or autonomous vehicle technologies, before they get on the roadways and maybe create that safety hazard that none of us want to see that could set us back from the technology. So those are some of the things that we're doing at the Institute for Simulation and Training, and piggybacking on the great work that's going on over in the engineering departments and with some of our partner schools as well.
We have a small fleet of toys, basically cars, not Teslas.
Yeah, it's nice to have a few Teslas laying around. So Dean, this is one of your slides
Yes.
I grabbed here. It talks about the major building blocks for creating an autonomous vehicle. You want to talk to that a little bit?
Sure, this goes back into the education piece. So my big push also is educating the next generation of engineers for him and for you and for your companies. How do you make the next autonomous vehicle engineers? And these are all the subjects you have to kind of hit. Obviously, this technology spans lots of industries. So all the way at the top from sensors, sensor technology, what is that sensor? What are the specs? What are the requirements? What are the size? What does it change? To how do you integrate the software using a real-time operating system like ROS? How do you program that? Do you know how to use Linux? How do you integrate that into a very small computer? To easy to use, it's funny, I had a cop, the cop on campus at Polytech said, take my 2003 car and make it autonomous. And I'm like, there's no electronic steering control. Now I got to get a mechanic. So they need to understand that. Then they need to understand data management, lots of data, 4 terabytes of data per car per day, what's going to happen to that. And the last part is connectivity, which is what the wireless industry is dealing with. So there's lots of pieces that go into teaching the autonomous vehicle, autonomous technologies, engineer students.
So Jason, where are the gaps? You're looking for your recruiting, is it everywhere or?
So there's actually two gaps. So one, we've hired and brought in about 150 people here in Orlando. Does anyone know how many economic incentives we asked for?
0.
Correct, none, not a dime. And my chief business officer, Scott Ferris, he was former chair of the EDC. So we knew what to do. We didn't want the money. What we wanted was help. We want expedited permitting so we can grow. We grow out of buildings faster than we can anything. And there's a lot of things I'm good at. One thing I'm really bad at is figuring out how much space we're going to need. 2 is we want to be able to operate our vehicle. It's really great. When is the track going to be ready?
Probably Christmas of 18.
Okay. I got to drive now. Today. Or I'm going to drive someplace else, which means that team is going to be housed someplace else. Talk about economic incentives. Let's figure out a way on how we can drive our cars on streets today.
I'd like to chat during lunch. That's important. I think that we're all talking about ways to help pull Orlando forward in this region, because if Illuminar leaves, that's a lot of jobs, because you're going to be printing jobs, and bigger companies are going to come and follow this expertise here.
And we're talking about 500,000 square feet for our next building. Those are a lot of high-tech jobs. Building high-tech products here in Central Florida, doing our manufacturing here. Our new VP of manufacturing had 5,000 people reporting to him in his previous employer. We want to create high-tech jobs. This is what I've heard this region talk about since I moved here. And we're hopefully going to do it. And what do I need a place to drive my cars. It's really
I
simple.
think that's part of what the foresight of the team to do the Central Florida Autonomous Vehicle Partnership.
But it's not quick enough for instance. We're gonna probably work with NASA.
Yeah, but even working with NASA, the amount of red tape we're getting, with just, yes, it's there, right? I can, within 45 minutes of my office, I could be down at U and I can be out at NASA. What a great opportunity. And it's gonna take us months. So, 1. 2, hiring talent, hiring smart talent. I've got some of his PhD students working for me. I've got interns from UCF. And so what we do is we mix the graybeards with the young talent. We're really, really fortunate that we're able to bring in some really high quality talent and grow the team. And then we leverage the software, the AI teams out in California. But we randomly, one of my guys randomly met because he was talking with his girlfriend about AI neural nets, and my co-founder happening in the front of him in line for a movie. Going to Regal Cinemas and literally turned around and said, "Can you say that again?" He now works for me. So, but that's kind of what it takes here. But it's also a great thing. Central Florida is great, is that they're not as transient as they are in the Bay Area. They come, they join a company. We say we bring a little bit of Silicon Valley to Orlando, and we bring a lot of Orlando to Silicon Valley. So, we buy lunch for every single employee, full catered lunch every single day, just like as if you were working at Google. Drinks, fully stocked fridge. It used to bother me that when I had to go when I was at work, if I wanted a Diet Coke, I had to pay 50 cents or $1 to get a Diet Coke. So, keep them, retain them, treat them well, give them good benefits, and we're hiring them. And the city is really trying to help us. They've got some really creative ideas on how to use some new areas like near Lake Nona to accelerate some of that testing. So it is happening. And really, my biggest challenge is finding really high quality engineers. Manufacturing infrastructure exists here in town. We're fortunate.
So Jim, Thomas, are we interested in that little company begins with an A moving here? Is that,
Oh, yes.
yeah, I would imagine.
Yeah, we're
So-
hard at work at that.
Yeah, so I would imagine with that, you know, these pockets of excellence that we have here are germane to the future, right? And where Amazon's going, so we've got the quality of life. We've got so many of those things that the larger markets can't address, right? The cost of living, all of that. So we've got all those components. So it's marshaling these pockets of genius that we have, right? So,
Can I give you a tip, a trick that we've used? So I'm looking for senior people typically. These people typically have kids. They're kids anywhere from about 3 to 15, 18. So if they're out of the house and they're at college, it's pretty easy to get them to come here because they're empty nesters. But they got kids in school, or younger kids, it's really hard. So one of the things we do for all of our directors and above, or anyone that we really highly covet, is the last thing we do in the offer letter is we offer them and their family members Disney annual passes for the first year. Okay. 4 or 5 grand, money well spent. And it allows, you've got to leverage what you've got. And one of the candidates said, hey, you know, if you were Austin or something, you know, all these other places and want to be Silicon this and Silicon that and Silicon that, like, one, you guys are doing some cool stuff. It helps. Forbes, Fortune, TechCrunch, Recode, Business Insider, all those articles really help get the tech talent here. But then, hey, we'll send you and your family to Disney. And you know, one of my directors of optical engineering literally goes every other weekend. So leverage your talents.
well, we have a lot of good 80s bands right now. I missed Night Ranger this year. Too bad. Okay, so let's come back to some of the granular and talk about the functions that we're starting to solve with these sensors and where we're going. Dean, you want to touch on a couple of the systems, the major systems, and what type of communications? So it's a two-part. It's sensors, but then what type of network? So are we using short range? Are we using 5G? How are we building this system out?
Sure, my question first would be, do you use LiDAR to do image classification, image sensing? And the answer, and I would probably throw that to you, it's probably yes and no, is that correct?
So what happens is these cars have been nearsighted and they've got really bad vision. Technically, they're legally blind. And they're driving themselves. So herein lies the problem. Our sensor provides high enough resolution, and what it does is it moves the LiDAR sensor and it becomes the primary sensor in the car. And then other things are used to validate what's out there. And it's more, I mean, you've got it right, but emergency braking, so there's this thing called ADAS. I didn't have time to go into all this ADAS, which is what a lot of, like my car will supposedly stop if it can see the car in front of me. It's 2016 Infiniti Q70, and I have it on all the time, and I watch, because what do I do for a living? And I watch, does it see the car in front of me? Does it see, and why doesn't it see the car in front of me? And you can tell that it can't see it. That's dangerous. I watched a neat video last night on Top Gear where they were doing all this testing as well. Primary sensor is LiDAR, then you've got radar, then you've got cameras, and there are a lot of issues with cameras on this. And so surround view, LiDAR, beyond adaptive cruise control, you still need ultrasonic sensors. But here's the interesting thing. This will burn this off. How much data are these cars generating per day?
4 terabytes.
4 terabytes. Yeah, good luck with that. What was the Super Bowl consumption?
Right.
How much?
Right, we're 27 and 35, right, so for the whole Super Bowl, 72,000.
One car, 4 terabytes.
So let's expand it to your question. If we go beyond just an autonomous vehicle, we really want to make the car smart. We make it connected, and then you go back to what networks and how does the infrastructure fit with autonomous connected vehicles? Because I'm sure we'd all agree that making a car just autonomous itself is not the end all. It's when they talk to each other, they talk to the infrastructure. You do vehicle to vehicle and vehicle to infrastructure. So that's when you come in with the wireless needs, which is the back part of some of the other people I talk in the FAA department. with 5G, which I do think is going to move the bar significantly. But you got 5G, you got 4G, you got dedicated short-range radio or dedicated short-range technologies. You've got Bluetooth, all of those technologies that go into making a wireless communication available at short range and at long range on the backhaul become very important. And I'm sure we can talk about that.
Yeah.
We have a project that we're going to talk about that. But making the cars talk to each other and talk to infrastructure goes into a lot of different areas.
Yeah, so tomorrow we'll be presenting on smart cities at a conference of the wireless industry. And their concern is, what type of networks are we supposed to be building? Do I lose my towers if you need short range? So the answer is, right, it's a head net. What are you seeing with some of your research and actual work on it as Insurance Network?
I think in terms of, as I mentioned previously, I think in terms of the long term, the radio bands are getting saturated. I think that's very clear. I mean, you're essentially imagining a situation where you've got thousands of devices just in a small room. You showed a pretty nice picture earlier showing the smaller cells. Now you're talking about picocells and femtocells. It's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. There's going to be a place where economically that wouldn't make sense. At least, you're imagining, you're sort of predicting that. So the question is, at what time that will be? So the base stations are going to become small, maybe a few meters in terms of the ranges. So what do we do after that? So that's why I think alternative bands, like optical bands, there are even very exploratory research going on in terms of UV. Terahertz is getting a lot of traction. But closest to the industry right now is the millimeter wave. And there's quite a lot of interest in several companies have started developing millimeter wave antennas. But of course it has issues. Line of sight requirement is coming along with it. And essentially that's something that limits your mobility and capability of communicating in a more flexible way. I think in the long run, we will just have to keep exploring these alternative bands and work with their physical properties, although they may not be the best to like.
One of the things that we're seeing, another asset of Orlando, is how can we learn from the military? The whole reason that Creole for lasers and IST for simulation exists is because of the debt we owe to military research for years and years. If you think about what they have to do, the aircraft carrier has to keep going in a low comm, no comm, or full comm situation. So if you think about other vehicles in our fleets, if you want to call them that, we're going to need to follow some of those same principles and models. We can learn from that. And we can see where there's self-healing networks, we can see where there's multiple redundancies, we can see where there's no common environments where things still work, kind of local host versus cloud, for those of you in that space too. Those are things that we're constantly learning about. We're also being asked by DISA, by NSA, a number of other places to look at the cybersecurity of these things. We talked a lot today about interconnectivity in all of these different areas. I haven't heard a lot of talk about that, but I'm sure it's top of mind for all of you who are in the space. But those are things we have to continuously look at, especially with connected vehicles, and how are we going to use that in light of vehicle communication, machine learning or artificial intelligence, and how those are going to play out together as a whole system level, almost like the ITS type of models that you guys are doing with the city and beyond too. I think those are going to be really important aspects to what we have to do and how we go from the micro to the macro level view of how this is going to be rolled out.
So what would be, all this data, with the 4 terabytes, how much of it needs to be saved, or where is it going? What's the role of machine learning and big data in all of this? I know the insurance company wants to know every second that you speed and, that kind of thing. So how does that all come together? If we got 4 terabytes a day and we're saving all that data.
Right, so I'll throw it down the line real quick, but my big take on that is you got to figure out, you're going to use data analytics. So you got to figure out how much of that data, it's the same problem we have in the military, you fly airplanes, you have too much data. which data is important to pay attention
Actionable.
to, and which is actionable intelligence that you need to, and which of it is just noise clutter that's going on. A lot of it's going to be used internally in the car to make decisions, but a lot of it needs to be captured for data analytics on LiDARs, data analytics on sensors, data analytics for the data traffic management system. So I think part of that is filtering how much of that needs to be used, how can we use it, but then of course, regardless, even if I cut half of it out, 2 terabytes is still a heck of a lot of data per car per day. So down the line.
Any other thoughts there? What we do with the data?
Well, we need the data because we want to see where we disengage and where a car disengages. You want to see the events prior to, you want to see what happens after, and the problem is you don't know. And again, driving down the highway, keeping in a lane, adaptive cruise control, it's really, really easy. It's when my test for self-driving car is now I-4. There's 8 different markings to the lanes in I-4, right? Which, I don't know which lane I'm supposed to be in. So how is a car going to figure that out? And it can't. It just, self-driving car cannot do that today. That's the litmus test. But we need the data, and at the end of the day, the car comes in, and we have to plug it in and download it. Or here.
I want to go to that, another side issue to that. Who owns the data? He needs the data. The city needs the data. Are you going to measure how many times I go to 7-Eleven in a day? And do I own that data since I drove it? That's another whole issue that once you get the lawyers involved, they back off a little bit.
I actually very much agree with you. And I think that's, processing data is certainly important. And we have challenges, technical challenges with it. But we have seen several times in various other engineering domains that we have been able to go over technical hurdles by time, and then when the economy and the technology comes together. But the challenge, I think, with the data is regulating it is just we are, I think, essentially out of ideas. I mean, in terms of how to do it. We have been observing very interesting things regarding social media, for example, data. Regarding this particular one, right? I mean, clearly there's privacy issues, privacy challenges. How do you essentially make sure that the data is in the right hands at the right time? Is something that is very hard to solve. I think that's a big challenge that will involve multiple disciplines coming together.
So there's a lot of projections that with an autonomous vehicle, it's going to change the dynamics of parking, how much real estate has to be assigned to parking garages. It will have some impact on traffic flows and all that good stuff. And I'd love to get deeper into some of those areas, but again, in time. So let's do the one where we can, Jason's VC friends, they want to see it tomorrow, and Dr. Dean and the safety and all those engineering guys, they may be seeing things coming a little slower. When's all this happening? I put up a slide, Dean, that you use, I've seen before. So why don't you take your first crack at it, and then let's come across, and that'd be a good way to summarize before we get some food.
Right, in fairness, every time I give this speech, which is now twice a week, it used to be once a month, now it's twice a week when I give this speech, I changed the slide, and if you ask me, so I think since I did this as it's partially my opinion, but it's partially research from the internet of experts who say this is when it's going to be out there. You can see my numbers. The big number for me is the saturation level, the far left column over here, far right for you guys. Over here, that's when it starts to make a real impact. It's not just new purchases, it's when they're on the roads, and you can define Tesla maybe as 2021, a Lexus is 2025, and my stupid little Hyundai, I don't have a Tesla, sorry, my stupid little Hyundai is 2035. That's when I'm going to buy it, but the impact is on the far column. I'll throw it down the line because these are what my numbers are, and I think everybody's going to have a different opinion.
For sure.
All right, so
Tomorrow.
No, please no. They're not ready. So Ford says 2021, GM says about the same thing. Maybe these slip, maybe not, I don't know. What I do know is that typically when I talk to more chronically challenged people, they say, hey, I can't wait to go buy my self-driving car so it can drive me to work, and then it can go home and sit in my garage, and then it can pick me up at the end of the day. I'm like, okay, no. That ain't gonna happen, and it ain't gonna happen for a very long time. There's gonna be a difference between fleet deployment and showroom deployment. The safety systems will be advancing greatly, ADAS and other things in the showroom, but we're talking about fleets. We're talking about the Ubers, the Lyfts, the Googles, the Apples, all these guys are looking at fleet deployments, and other companies looking at fleet deployments for ride sharing. That's what's gonna happen, and it's going to pick you up, take you to a place. It cost me last night to go downtown at about $9-10 to go from Baldwin Park downtown. So I could go downtown, have a beer, I didn't have to deal with parking, and I didn't have to deal with driving while having alcohol. So I would have had to pay $10 to park somewhere downtown. I spent 15 minutes on my way here trying to figure out how to park in this building. So that's self-driving vehicles. It's the convenience, it's the time. What's your time one? I took the East-West here because it is certainly worth a couple bucks to save half an hour from the research park to here. It's gonna be the same thing. And that car ride is gonna go from $10 to $2 to $3. That's what self-driving is about. 2021 is gonna start, it'll be an adoption, but you're gonna see fleets, you're gonna see complete new economies, the rental car companies are gonna figure out how to get into this, the trucking is gonna
Right.
be huge, absolutely huge.
Let's be the first one.
But, remember what I said, 1 second today, stopping time? I actually have a tractor trailer with 1 second of reaction time. I can at least get 7 seconds. It's not gonna be enough for a tractor trailer. So, whole new economies, whole new things, but I think this is close. I think the dollar signs is the most important thing here. So these cars are expensive. You look at what they look like in the trunk. Go Google self-driving cars and then go look at for images of the trunks. They're wild. The amount of technology in there, they're expensive right now. They'll get less and less expensive. But it's going to be in the 2020s. But next year, supposedly Google's giving self-driving car rides. I think Nevada or somewhere.
We've got open space there.
Well, not much to add to what Jason said. I think the only other context that I can think about is the long distance driving. Of course, convenient urban driving is very, very relevant, and I totally agree with you. I mean, rather than dealing with parking and all that, I mean, essentially crowdsourcing the ride is making much more sense. But if you have like a family travel, long distance, I think there's still some room there where self-driving might help. I agree with the overall consensus that it takes quite a bit of time and proven technology to trust something totally new, like self-driving, where life is obviously very much involved. So it's probably going to take a significant amount of time.
Yeah, I agree with everything. If we're talking about street vehicles for regular vehicle drivers. But when we look at some of the research that's going on in things like platooning, where you have one human driver in the front, you have two vehicles right behind it too. I think there's a lot of potential for safety where it's kind of the dumb AI that's following along. I see the things that are going on here that aren't going anywhere else. Like we have an autonomous drone out on the water for SpaceX that goes out 2 times a month right now. And we have some things that we're leaders in. Our university's been winning top 5 in surface and subsurface for water and watercraft. And also we have a co-op at NASA for autonomous vehicle flying, drone flying, and things like that too. A lot of places that we can test here at test grounds. I know that's one of the things you're looking for. But I think we also need to look at things like in our retirement communities, low-speed vehicles, the golf carts you talked about too, and what that could be. And some of those things are already here and being tested now. Some of the capabilities that you have. 10 years ago, we had our DARPA Grand Challenge vehicle that got to the finals here at UCF. I would, on a pre-programmed route, I would be in that all day long and be okay with that at level 4 probably, maybe not fully 5, but level 4 autonomy too. So it's been around for a long time. It's just getting out to the mass market and making sure that it's safe in all conditions, not just a pre-programmed route. But those are things that might really have some differences too when we talk about pre-programmed routes, when we talk about other modes of transportation, other uses of transportation. I've been impressed with the number of lives I think we're going to save with two things. One, the crash vehicles that you have within roadway construction too, that Royal and others are doing. And also some of the things that you could do with low-speed vehicles. So I think those are areas too. If we look at the broad picture and where Orlando could be leaders, we have a lot of elderly. It'd be great to have low-speed vehicles in these communities. We have a lot of transportation, modes of transportation that you have other places. Those are all things I think we could expand our view just a little bit. The roadways are important, but expand our view a little bit.
Excellent. So I've been a little unfair. I haven't made much time for questions because we're kind of plowing through here. But a couple questions. Anyone have questions? And then we'll start.
I had a question. Just, you know, we're not going to be using these autonomous vehicles on other roadways. We're going to be sharing them. So at some point, Dr. Bushy's slide talks about getting saturation. We're going to have a lot of autonomous vehicles that are programmed not to break the law, and yet people that we know all day long, I see so many people texting. Do you guys envision a need for a lot of collaboration with the city, with the first responders, ambulance companies? I mean, we're going to save lives with these automated vehicles, but you also see the connect between people that don't have one and people that have one being a huge problem?
Yeah, what keeps me up at night is thinking my daughter, who's 25, God bless her soul, but she can't drive to save her life, is going to be on the road with an automated vehicle. So that interim period from 2025 to 2035, where you have mixed traffic, both autonomous and non-autonomous, that's a big deal. And that's going to cause some problems because you got this law, like you said, a law-obeying autonomous vehicle and non-law-obeying daughter of mine. It's a big deal.
I have a 10-year-old daughter, so I'm highly motivated.
There's another area of technology, if you will. There's reg tech and insurance tech that I think are going to really factor into this too. And yeah, regulation technology, the smart contracts, just talking about blockchains and things like that too. That being able to do those things on the fly and figuring out who the final source of authority is on that, whether insurance companies take that market on or if there's a huge self-insured like Ford and Tesla come up publicly saying they're going to do, that's going to change who's responsible. And I think that change in who's responsible is going to change some of the technology we use, some of the way we use it, and the interconnectivity between frankly, the smart vehicles and the dumb vehicles on the road, and the smart drivers on the road and the dumb vehicles, dumb drivers on the road too. I think we've got both of those that are going to be part of our factoring in this too, but it's bigger than just the technology working.
Does the cost, in the commercial side, does the cost to implement kind of bar it a little bit on the timeline you mentioned? I think of like a Cisco. Someone's got to unload the goods on the Cisco truck, so maybe you have an autonomous truck that can get you there, and maybe the driver sleeps, but you still need a driver. Hence, if I'm Cisco or any company, if anyone's in Cisco here, I don't need to speak for your company, but you still got to pay a driver. Hence, why buy the automated vehicle, which is probably going to be a lot more expensive? Just keep paying a driver to do it, who has to still load the vehicle.
Can I address that one? So first, there's a limit on how many hours per road, per day you can go. So let's forget Cisco. Now let's talk transportation of food and perishables. You've got a certain amount of time to get those Florida oranges or grapefruits or whatever you want to get from one place to the other before you have issues. Strawberries is a great example. So if you can literally send the truck and go, yet will you still need a driver? Maybe. Maybe you need, it stops at pre-designated routes. Maybe you have a driver sitting there ready to take it to the last mile. There's a lot of ways to solve this. Someone's still got to do the safety checks. So it's not going to be an electric truck for a while. Someone's got to put gas in it. All those things. You may be paying a driver, and the driver's just there for what if. You know, so what if love bug season on the beach line, right? All the sensors are covered. Oh crap, you know, right?
5 different sensors.
Has anyone here driven on the
I live on
beach
it.
line
Yeah,
during love bug season with their vehicle? It's the human driver. Oh crap! So road salt, road spray.
But that was my point about the platooning. You might be able to transport 2 or 3 times the volume for the same price per human in that mix. There might also be, like you're saying, the handoffs too. And there's some places where having the three rig trucks are not allowed, and you have to do platooning, things like that.
So there's a lot of testing going on with platooning right now. I think that's the first place you will see this. And instead of having like 5 drivers and 5 trucks, you may have 2 drivers and 5 trucks. And you'll see that on interstates. Doing a lot of testing like that in Nevada right now, and some in Arizona. And the turnpike will be doing some testing on the main line of the turnpike. The trucking industry is expressing an interest for the longer haul testing, not the shorter haul in urban areas like this. So I think you'll see their biggest motivation is energy saving. I think you'll see it there first.
I believe there's an 18-wheeler going up and down the turnpike right now, autonomous.
Yes, and what they're looking at doing is having like 4 or 5 trucks in a platoon, and maybe 2 or 3 drivers eventually, so you don't have a driver in every truck, but enough drivers to be able to help out if something, gets out of kilter.
So, we're talking about, 4 terabytes of data for every car and things like that. So, as I'm looking now and I'm sitting on the 417 and the lovely sign tells me that there's no traffic and it's clear from here to Lake Mary, and I'm stopped because there's a traffic jam right there and now. What are we doing or looking at to get information more timely, as this isn't just about autonomously driving the vehicle, it's about smart transportation and making sure the vehicle knows miles down the road what's happening.
Can I ask a question? Do you use Waze?
No.
You can download an app and it'll do that really, really well.
I've been really impressed with some of the, anybody here from FDOT? I've been impressed in some of the meetings I've heard from them about them talking about public-private partnership with Waze and 511, where they share information back and forth and are trying to get that to, the signs might be like the last mile, the last place that it kind of gets to, but getting it to the real-time information systems, whether they're on your mobile device or whether they're when you call in or things like that. I know they've made some great strides in there. Still room to go, but those are things I know that they're very acutely aware of, and trying to leverage all data sources within the GIS, Geographic Information System spectrum, whether that's Waze or others too, putting those together.
I know the city is taking heart to it too. Orlando is taking heart to it. Jacksonville is actually trying to figure out going from a monorail system to an autonomous vehicle system. But one of the things they're thinking about is redesigning Bay Street, which is the street that goes down to the stadium, which is their 6-lane highway. They're going to redesign it, but one of the things they need to think about is making connected points from the stoplights to the buildings so that the information travels to traffic control systems, to the first responders. So I think the cities get it, but it's not just the vehicles. You're right, it's got to be infrastructure too.
So one of the projects we're working on locally for the entire region is to make sure that we have interconnected systems, not just a fiber, but all our systems interconnected. Our goal is to have real-time information on every mode of transportation in this region for everyone. So, for example, I live in Watford Lakes. If I'm coming to a Magic game, I can decide whether, put the bicycle on the car, I drive the car to a certain point, I park it, I put the bike on a bus or something else. I need to know that information. What's it like today? So I know how to trip chain, or what's it like on a typical Monday at 6 o'clock, so on. So we're actually working on that, and I think what you'll see is that government will take it so far and then try to give the information to the private sector so that they can develop and keep these applications going, not necessarily apps, but applications going. There's a lot of risk associated with the development of these things. Technology changes so fast and so on. So we want to take it to a certain point with the underlying infrastructure, and then give the information to the private sector so that the in-vehicle navigation companies, cell phone companies, companies like Waze and so on, can take it and do their own things. They may do it in different ways, and then the consumer or the traveler can have the option of selecting from any one of those. Instead of government trying to take it the whole way, we just want to facilitate.
Well, but eventually, though, when you start talking about smart transportation and smart vehicles, it's the vehicle that's actually going to have to start to do some of that processing.
Yeah, artificial intelligence inside
right
there.
So the vehicle will be doing a lot, but ultimately still, you will have the ability to go in and put certain criteria into the decision-making process that your vehicle or anything else. I don't think we should be leaving all that to just a vehicle. You should still be able to go in and dictate certain criteria for decision-making.
those are the type of big problems that we're very interested in partnering on too. And I'm sure all the partners up here as well to try and help solve some of those things too. That's the way, UCF calls itself Americans Partnership University, and that's the type of things that we need to be addressing together. We're so pleased to be in a partnership with these guys as well.
All right, well, we're go ahead,
So
final
just finishing
point.
that, so I just popped in Waze. How long would it take me to get back to the office in the research park? If I take the East-West Expressway via Challenger Parkway, it's 18 minutes. If I take Colonial Drive, it will take 33 minutes. And if I take the 4-way to 417 to University now, 26 minutes. Yes.
So coming here this morning, there was an accident on I-4 coming from Tampa. And sure enough, when I got to Sassa, people started peeling off there. And I'm following the line of traffic as it went through the trailer park to go around the accident. And I got back on the highway. It originally said I was going to be delayed by 30 minutes. And when I got back on the highway, I was back to where I had been before.
So it starts with this. This is essentially connected cars. You were using Waze?
Yep.
So Waze is an Israeli company that got bought by Google, Google Maps. Google Maps is catching up to taking that technology, but it uses the wisdom of the crowd and uses all the other cars on there. And when I was stopped at a construction event on Dean Road this weekend, it popped up and said, "Hey, you're not moving. What's going on?" And it asked me.
The Tesla actually has it built into and piggybacking off that.
It is. It's taking that data off of Google Maps. And that, to me, this is an example of where it can go. The problem is I need to use my phone. When is the car going to be smart enough? Tesla is leading the field in having connected cars like that.
Well, this is all fascinating. The key takeaway is we have one of the strongest ecosystems in the world right here to get this work done. So everyone, as we go through, I think everyone's staying for lunch, and then Diana's going to lead the session. We've got a number of key players here locally who are driving for discussion, but it's to keep this type of dialogue going. All right, so I want to thank everyone. I want to thank the panelists for taking so much time. Yeah, we do. Once they shut it down, we're all here. I don't mind.
Very special. I just realized this is still on.
So glad to have you here. We have a great turnout coming today. One of the biggest turnouts we've ever had, which I think reflects the growth of our industry. So we're so glad you all made it. I know how busy everybody is, which is a good thing right now. But I know you have a lot of places you can spend your time, and we're really honored and grateful that you decided to spend your time here. And we went through a lot of effort to make sure that it's going to be worth your while. We put together 2 fantastic days of speakers, some great speakers, and we have engaging panels. We have an incredible exhibit hall that's filled up with all kinds of the latest technology and networking events lined up for you. So it may be small cells, but we try to have big hospitality. So we're glad you could make it. Some of you probably remember back, I see some of the old timers here, not to name any names, Alan Dixon. You probably remember the HeadNet Forum started as a very small event. You can probably fit everybody on in one of these tables in a little room. It was actually called the DAS Forum back then, and later we had an event called DAS in Action, and then we turned into the HeadNet Expo as things expanded, because we tried to grow along with the industry. And we're focused on what counts to really help you grow your business. Today's event is focused on 3 main things. First, connected commercial real estate, which we've heard a lot of you really want to focus on. Second, the ongoing densification of mobile networks, of course, through small cells. And third, the Internet of Things, which is what the role of infrastructure is in making sure that we have a successful rollout. Because you can't have an Internet of Things without a network of reality, and you folks are the network of reality. We're also hosting another business matchmaking program this year. We are really looking forward to that. We're going to have meetings one-on-one with investors. And you know, it's really wonderful that the support of this event comes from our sponsors. We have so many friends and industry leaders here, and we want to take a moment to thank our sponsors who have made this all possible. The quality of this event would not be possible without these incredible companies. So we're really grateful for their generous support and for all that you do, your commitment to the industry. This is really a world-class event. It's not easy to put something like this on. So we thank you for doing that. Now, let's see here. Yeah, issue this thing. Oops. Went into automatic mode. So we are really proud of our industry and how integral smartphones have become in everybody's lives. I think that you've probably all seen your own kids, if you have them, obsessively looking at them. I actually feel kind of bad about it every year when I see how much time our kids spend on the smartphone. Then when I realize it's good for business, I say, oh, it's okay. Let them get away with it. But it's really become integral in our lives. And you think about 5G, we're connecting everything, whether it's delivery of healthcare, it's revolutionizing transportation, it's driving overall economic development. We're creating smarter cities, machine-to-machine communications, Internet of Things, and of course 5G is what's going to put it all on steroids. And you in this room are the people that are making that happen. That's why I'm so proud to represent this industry, because it's you folks that are putting together the combination of small cell technologies, distributed antenna systems, Wi-Fi infrastructure, all of those antennas that work together with towers to enable coverage and capacity. And because of all of you, for years, the U.S. has been the world leader in wireless networks. And we couldn't be prouder of the work that you've done. And that Expo provides a perfect setting for everybody to come together. I think you'll leave here better prepared to take on the challenges of building the next generation of mobile wireless networks. We'll hear from some of the leading professionals in the field who are on the front lines in communities across the country. And today we'll find out how Verizon is approaching the Internet of Things from Mark Bartolomeo. We'll also hear from Extenet Systems CEO Ross Benayer and AT&T's Gordon Mansfield. And that's all before lunch. And then we keep cooking through the day. Later we'll take a deep dive into how wireless infrastructure and mobile networks intersect with commercial real estate through a series of panel discussions and keynotes. And no doubt there's going to be some incredible new ideas that come out of this. There always are. I've always heard great stories coming out of this event, strategic partnerships and profitable deals that we'll all be seeing coming out of the next 2 days here. I think you've all seen the demand. I talk about it as a wireless data crush. As demand is going to rapidly increase, we're going to put a lot of pressure on these networks, and that means a lot of pressure on all of us to keep up with that growth. You think, who wouldn't want to be in an industry that's growing that fast, but at the same time there's a lot of pricing pressure. And so it doesn't always spell into increased ARPU or increased revenue per user. But we know that the densification of wireless infrastructure is the only way that we're going to meet that demand. It's in fact probably the biggest factor, bigger than any other factor, in helping the carriers meet this growing demand. And it takes investment to improve that coverage and capacity. So one of the things we're doing here is doing our business matchmaking again, as I said. That's why I invited some key investors to meet here at the show to connect with our members and with show participants. We're really thrilled to have investment firms including MVP Capital, Peppertree Capital Management, U Capital, BKD Corporate Finance, and Unison. They're going to be hosting one-on-one meetings to enable them to learn about specific investment opportunities, to enable them to see the products and services that companies are offering, and to make relationships that could lead to some very lucrative business deals, we hope. So thank you for making that possible. I wanted to just take a moment to talk about the work we're doing in Washington. We are your advocates in Washington, as you know. We are out there fighting every day for you. When we're not connecting you to business opportunities, we're spending a lot of time lobbying. And how WI is different from so many other organizations in this space is that we're there 24/7 for you every day. Everything that we do goes back into our ability to advocate for you each and every day. I spent more time than I care to admit in government as a commissioner of the FCC and other positions, and I understand all too well how government can create problems, because maybe I created a few of them myself. But I also know that government has potential to help, and we've been really finding in the last 2 decades that I've been in this field, we've never seen government on all levels more interested in helping us roll out broadband, especially the federal and state governments. They're working with us to streamline barriers to broadband deployment, and there's a lot of focus on small cells and DAS. And our association has led the way. We led the way in creating shot clocks and speeding the processing of applications for wireless infrastructure. I can't imagine how many untold millions have been saved by some of these efforts, and it's delivered better wireless service to communities around the country. And now we're queued up to make, I think, more progress than we've seen in some time. We're front and center in Congress, where bills are moving in the House and the Senate to speed broadband deployment. They're trying to help us to streamline the process, and they want to help open federal property to easier siting. And we like what we've heard from the Trump administration on infrastructure. We're working with the White House on that plan. Nobody knows when or if it's going to get rolled out, if it's going to get enacted. But we do know that if it does, there's a growing consensus that it should include broadband in it. Not just money, but actually a provision to streamline siting. So that's good news. And in terms of tax reform, if we can get that done, lower taxes should be good for the industry. We have a full-time lobbyist there making sure that whatever the package looks like is shaped to meet our industry's needs. As you can imagine, we spent a lot of time in front of the FCC, where we're making progress on a number of fronts. In 2014, you might recall that WIA helped the FCC adopt volumetric definitions and streamline the small cell build-out. And we got them to eliminate all kinds of duplicative and unnecessary historic and environmental reviews for small cells, which is now saving the industry from all kinds of misery. You might not think about it, that you're not going through a 106 review or a NEPA review, but I'm sure you're glad you're not doing that. And now the FCC is about to act on another major initiative to reduce barriers. It has a really comprehensive proceeding looking at virtually everything we care about to streamline small cell deployment. And there again, I think the FCC is going to require localities across the country to streamline their siting processes. And Chairman Pike created the Broadband Development Advisory Committee, or BDAC, which I serve on. He was kind enough to appoint me to that. A lot of our members are on that or in the working groups. And it presents enormous opportunity for the industry and municipalities to work together to clear obstacles to deployment. Bottom line is that we're seeing the federal government asking how they can help us get more broadband to people. You don't see that happening every day where government says, how can we help? But they really are for our industry. We're, as an industry, putting up $30 billion a year in private capital. And if we can get this streamlining done, I think we can see even more investment, and we can see that investment channeled productively toward your businesses as opposed to being tied up in red tape or being paid to municipalities in unreasonable fees. And we've amped up our efforts in the states as well. Made a lot of progress. In the last year alone, 13 states have enacted bills that streamline broadband deployment, reduce barriers, get rid of delays, rationalize fees. So this is a serious progress, and there's a number of bills that are pending in other states where we in some cases have lobbyists. We're working with our members that have lobbyists in those states. And each of these bills follows an industry-supported framework to site wireless facilities more efficiently and also responsibly, setting a height limit of 50 feet for small cells, so we know what it means. The WI has worked in a lot of states to update pole attachment regulations as well. We're helping our members get access to utility poles at fair rates, terms, and conditions. So I think this is going to pave the way for the next generation of 5G. And we have a group called the Innovation Technology Council, which is working on a number of issues of interest to all of you. We have putting the finishing touches on our report right now on smart cities and how to enable them, because smart cities require smart regulation. And we're going to point the way to do that. ITC is going to be driving 5G technologies and what it will take to deploy new systems across the country. It's looking at all the technical barriers, business and educational and policy initiatives that it'll take to make 5G a reality. So we really appreciate everybody who served on that, chaired by Jake McLeod, who's an industry legend, of course, and we are thrilled by all your contributions. One other issue that we've been working on I wanted to touch on was the skills gap. 5G can create 3 million jobs, according to a recent study. Not just for our industry, but for virtually every industry in the country. But the only way that gets done is if we have the right people to build that network. There's a dramatic skills gap, as all of you experience probably every day, in terms of what U.S. worker skills are and what technical professional skills they need to build these networks. So WIA, based on a lot of input from our members, decided to try to tackle this and try to help move it forward by creating the Telecommunications Education Center, or TEC. TEC's a learning program that is dedicated to improving not only education, but the quality and safety of the deployments. It was developed with help from our members, from people in academia, from subject matter experts, and we also work closely with the Telecommunications Industry Registered Apprenticeship Program to try to bring apprenticeships into our industry for people that want them. So our goal is to really improve career development in this industry. We're hearing that folks can't find enough qualified personnel to deploy these small cell networks. That means labor costs go up, that means quality goes down. So this is really the first of its kind initiative to try to close that skills gap. So our companies are staffed and ready to deploy the next generation of wireless technologies, because it's going to get tighter, not easier. There's going to be a lot more work ahead. If we don't have the workforce, it's going to be a problem. So we've created a number of courses that are really targeted toward what we've seen. We can deliver each on-site and online. They can provide your team with the skills and latest technical information that they need, because these are being developed by people that know what's going on in the field. So our subjects that we're going to look at in the initial phase, and this is just the initial phase, we're really looking at the fundamentals of the industry, because a lot of people are out there doing this work and they've learned on the job, they don't know the basics. So we've got Wireless 101, so people understand the RF environment that they're working in, and it's increasing congestion. Small cells and DAS, 5G, macrocellular infrastructure and Wi-Fi. And we can customize each tech course to meet your organization's specific onboarding, professional development, and training needs. So we've invested a lot of resources to make sure this is really designed to meet your needs, and I hope that if you aren't already working with us, you'll reach out to me or one of our staff and figure out how we can help. So we all know that with the demand bringing closer to the end users, antennas everywhere. Sometimes I think we should call ourselves Antennas Are Us, but there's a trademark problem with that. But it's changing how we build networks, both indoors and outdoors. And we're here in West Palm Beach to come together as an industry. I love it. Each year at the NetNet Expo, where we all get the best minds in the industry, people really dedicated to figuring out what are the challenges, how are we going to solve them. So we're here to try to strike to your bottom line. We're here to make the best connections, to learn the latest trends, to reduce regulatory burdens, to lower costs, facilitate faster deployments, and to train the workforce of the future. A lot of work to do. WIA has been awful busy. We have the right people here in the room to help us do it, experts who know how to move our industry forward. So we want to thank you all for being here. And once again, we want to thank our sponsors who've done such a tremendous job of supporting this year after year. I think we're all fortunate to be in this industry as it's growing fast, as we have all these exciting challenges. So we want to thank you all for coming. It's going to be a great show. Training and education initiatives. The company is a customer-focused, value-added distributor.
Introduction, and I also wanted to thank NetNet, the membership here, for inviting me to speak today about IoT and interconnected solutions. I also wanted to thank all of you involved in the infrastructure industry for being such great partners to carriers like Verizon. This is the infrastructure we've been working on for 20 plus years, nationwide in wireless. And I think we saw the resiliency that has been built into the infrastructure during Harvey and Irma, where we had good communications, we had reliable communications, we had highly resilient infrastructure. So thank you all for the work that you do. There is a lot more work to do. I started in the machine-to-machine and IoT industry about 15 years ago, and today when you checked in, you should have received a copy of the State of the Market report. I've been waiting for 15 years to be able to actually write in a report that we're making progress on the barriers to the adoption of IoT. So it's something that we've been looking at for many, many years and working through the issues of standards, security, interoperability, and cost. I wanted to just talk a little bit about what we're seeing today in the marketplace in terms of the transition from 2016 to 2017, and we'll cover some of those metrics. But where we are today is that the enterprises are really moving from their early adopter phases to full deployments. They're moving out of proof of concepts. We've seen the leaders in the industry, within energy and healthcare and infrastructure inspection, like smart cities, really moving aggressively into full deployments. And the reason being is because they have proven the business case and they have the total cost of ownership well defined. I think more importantly than the enterprise businesses is that with the improved business cases, we are seeing the small, medium-sized enterprise begin to deploy. So we're seeing this in the utility industry, where we've moved from the rate-based investor-owned utilities like SoCal Edison and Duke Energy and others, now to the municipal co-op, rural gas, water, and electric companies that aren't rate-based, that are service-based, and they'll be deploying more than 300 million meters to improve their smart energy systems over the next 10 years. The same thing in the transportation industry, and I know this group is very involved in promoting standards for interoperability and supporting a participatory regulatory environment. We see this as very critical within our transportation systems, and we're seeing more and more IoT solutions being deployed that supports compliance and the tracking of high-value assets, but also supporting safety with the recent Drug Safety Act that is requiring the shipment of all pharmaceutical drugs, big wireless deployments underway today for track and trace on a worldwide basis to help eliminate the $75 billion per year of counterfeit drugs entering the supply chain. So the same thing with smart communities. We're seeing this now being deployed where there is new infrastructure being built. So you see places like Sacramento, Austin, South Street, Hudson Yards, where we're building these cities within a city. We're definitely seeing some of the new infrastructure that's going in with the smart cities deployments. The growth rates really reflect moving from some small bases. We're seeing recent adoption in manufacturing, but this was off of a relatively small base as opposed to energy and utilities, which has been much more mature. The key thing with this is that the smart grid is moving into rural markets where previously it was just being deployed in core markets by the big IOUs. It's also moving into new markets with the tracking of things like gas meters and water meters, which previously weren't part of a lot of the wireless infrastructure monitoring. And then transportation and distribution, more and more compliance, the tracking of high-value assets, and then smart cities. I think as you all know, the demographic shift that's occurred with people moving more into the core markets, and this is creating demand for smart cities. It's creating demand for more spot cells, more small cell deployments to improve not only capacity, but support for 5G, or what we refer to as wireless fiber coming into these markets to support the growth rates in those markets. Bill is cautious. We're seeing it really serially progress, no big revolutionary shifts, but people are into this deployment phase. And these deployments are still being faced with some of the familiar hurdles that I heard Jonathan speak about earlier. So, how do we drive an effective participatory regulatory process to get on top of things like standards? How do we remove these common barriers to entry? None of our customers are investing in new technology or new infrastructure until we have agreement on the standards to support interoperability, until we can really do this in a very secure manner. And then how do we really align more of our service providers so that as a customer deploying IoT, I can actually deal with a smaller set of partners to deploy this end-to-end solution. I think one of the more common examples that we've seen, and the reason IoT was so slow to be adopted with smart grid was that these organizations were having to acquire a meter from one company, communication cards from another, a wireless network from another, hire systems integrators, buy hardware, buy software, and the net result was selling less electricity, to their customers. So these were very difficult business cases, made even more difficult by the fragmented ecosystem of suppliers. Additionally, security had been treated as an afterthought, even though that today it's at the top of everyone's to-do list. Security is the #1 barrier that people are concerned about. Most recently, what we have seen, and I think a lot of this is in place with the deployment of eSIM, is how can we build in security starting at the device, where devices are coming into the marketplace today. They don't have security. Virtually anyone can sell an IoT device and put it into market. There's not a lot of standards around that. Most recently, what you've seen with GSMA is driving the standards for managed certificate services. So really driving two-factor or dual-factor authentication out to machine-to-machine, something that we all use today on our computers, but the machine-to-machine device doesn't have a human interface, so it has to use a managed certificate service. Almost all of the IoT deployments are being driven across mobile private networks, so virtual networks, leveraging the radio access network, going across the core network, and then integrating in with cloud service providers so that when the IoT information is leaving the network gateway, it's actually directly integrated in to all the various public and private cloud service providers. And then the fourth piece of this that we see, of course, is the use of artificial intelligence to monitor all of the communications to these devices. AI looking for anomalies, so the effect that there is an anomaly in the communication, the particular service provider can shut down that particular device. The regulatory environment, again, very, very critical to us. Not only is it critical to get standards, but where we've seen strong participatory regulatory processes taking place, they have been probably the biggest drivers of IoT in the past. And there's some great examples that support that. If we think back to the Grid Modernization Act, that really drove the standards for the deployment of smart grid and resulted in wireless networks moving in commercial wireless networks to take advantage of smart grid deployments and monitoring. Most recently, the Drug Safety Supply Chain Act is driving a lot of capacity onto the wireless networks to track high-value assets. We've seen the FAA, of course, very involved in working with the industry to define Part 107. I think one of the next biggest challenges we'll have for all of our wireless communication infrastructure is being able to support communications at 400 feet and above, where almost all of our wireless infrastructure today was built to support us who are down here at ground level, not at 400 feet. So this is resulting in a lot of upgrades within the network. And then the Railroad Safety Act to continue to show improvements on positive train control. We think about some of the other gaps, whether it's cost, pricing, seamless integration. We've heard a lot about the IoT platforms being deployed. We believe that the IoT platforms are critical, and it has to be able to support these heterogeneous networks. So IoT platforms that are only supporting one carrier, or only supporting public spectrum, or only supporting unlicensed spectrum aren't going to proliferate. We've seen the IoT platforms that are being deployed are supporting all network topologies, all wireless spectrum, public and private spectrum, because as we're deploying IoT as a customer who wants to provide a service to our customer, we have to have the ability to run these applications on top of all the different network topologies. So IoT is going to be leveraging all network assets. When we talk about cost, the big shift in cost for us has been the deployment of Cat-M technology. and the IoT core network and network virtualization. We were doing deployments tracking vaccines for pharmaceutical companies. We were actually using a device that was about $300. Not a big issue for the pharmaceutical companies because they're tracking millions and millions of dollars of vaccine, on a single pallet that's being shipped in a truck, and it has to be monitored to be maintained below 49 degrees. Now we're launching those same modules down from the Cat 3 to the Cat M technologies, and that module, complete with all the capabilities to monitor temperature and location, will be somewhere around $48. So we see the cost dropping down from $300 to $48. And then next year, with the launch of narrowbanding and IoT, we'll see that get down into the $20 range. The reason this is important for us is that the cost of connectivity and the evolution of connectivity significantly expands the addressable market. So while we may be tracking on the wireless network infrastructure assets, they tend to be high-value assets. For the Internet of Things to grow, we have to be able to track everyday items, our backpacks, our briefcases, our suitcases, our umbrellas. But today's economics don't allow that to occur, but we're getting there very, very quickly, and you can see some of the market dynamics and how that really expands the addressable market as we move forward. And with that, not only comes the reduction in cost, but we also see the improvement in battery life, and we see the improvements in latency, in the market. So this will be continuing to open up into new use cases. In addition to the cost of the hardware itself that's being used to track the device, I think all of you have been involved in working with the NFV paths and the virtualized network. The network infrastructure today that's deployed for the commercial carriers, very expensive, very resilient. It's leveraging the IMS core. For IoT, we're actually creating a virtual core, which has a much reduced cost. We eliminate a lot of the licensing fees and other costs that are associated with the IMS core. This is not needed for IoT. The reason being is because we've moved over the past 10 years from tracking a relatively small number of devices. Within the US, the IoT deployments on commercial carriers like Verizon and AT&T, it's about 75 million devices in total, roughly. These tend to be more broadband devices that have significant throughput. In the future, we're deploying tens of millions of devices that may not communicate at all unless there's an exception created. So this really gives us the ability to leverage these IoT core networks and network virtualization. Regarding 5G, we see this as major partner collaboration. We've been leading to drive standards to get 5G in the market very, very quickly. What we decided to do in 5G about 3 years ago is pull together these partners, drive standards, do the testing. We launched test markets in about 11 areas of the US. We made all the information available to all of our partners and all the other carriers, really to have an open dialogue and an open exchange of information to be able to accelerate the adoption of standards. And we're actually seeing the actual speeds between 1.2 and 3.7 gigabits have been observed. We've been creating loads on the network and doing all different types of simulation, and we feel very good about the progress that's being made here. So when we think about IoT, these are really the three key issues that we just covered. Number one, it's about the cost, and it will expand the addressable market. It's the platform that provides flexible pricing, the ability to monitor and integrate the devices across any network topology, and the IoT security. So as long as we're continuing to have an open exchange of information and advocacy for the participatory regulatory process, this is where we end up if we get it right. And this is where the infrastructure that we're bringing into the market really has the ability to integrate across all of these different solutions not only to drive better economic growth, but to actually drive more safety and sustainability and societal innovation within our core market. So thank you very much. I really appreciated the opportunity to get with you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak to you this morning. We live in some pretty interesting times today, don't we, in the wireless industry, and it's going to get more interesting. It's pretty exciting to see some of the things that Mark just relayed in terms of what's going on from an IoT perspective, and that certainly is going to have implications in terms of what we do as an industry. What I thought I would do is give you a little bit of background about ExteNet. I think most of you know who we are. And then the rest of my remarks are going to be focused on our view of what's happening with this wonderful wireless evolution and the impact on network architecture going forward. So about ExteNet. We're principally an owner and operator of distributed networks. We built our first network in 2005. It was based on distributed antenna system technology, which all of you are pretty familiar with. So I'm one of the old guys that Jonathan referred to earlier in terms of being involved in this distributed networking industry. We build outdoor networks in dense urban and near and suburban areas, but we've also recently gotten involved in doing LTE fixed broadband deployments in the Tier 2 and Tier 3 markets with a platform that we call the Distributed Enhanced Packet Core platform, which allows us to do very speedy and economic solutions for LTE deployments for the carriers and the users in these rural markets, which we think is going to be important not only for those markets, but we think it has some applicability to where next generation networks are going. We're also involved in the indoor space, focusing on 4 principal verticals: commercial office space, healthcare, hospitality, and sports and entertainment. And I think many of you are probably witnessing this today. There's some very interesting changes going on in the indoor marketplace today, which I'll talk about in a little bit more depth in a second. So with that, this is my shameless plug for ExteNet. This is a depiction of a network that we're building in Manhattan. But it's really to serve as the foundation to make a couple of points here. One is that this is an integration of indoor networks that we've built as well as outdoor networks that we've built in this jurisdiction, and we're handling the transport of the traffic back to a handful of colo-locations depicted in the chart that you see here. This is important for a couple of reasons. One is that it has helped us lower the cost of building these networks on a combined basis. But secondly, we think it's also going to be important to the architecture of the future. The second point that I would make here is that you see a lot of dots in there representing nodes that have been deployed in this network, but this is just the beginning. As I think was related in Mark's presentation, you're going to need a lot more nodes and a lot more densification of the networks to do some of the very interesting things that we see coming in the future. And we use an internal term that we call hyperdensification for these networks. This is a similar picture for San Francisco, same kind of construct. And I will tell you, this is not unique to us. If you go around the country, I think you'll see that there are many jurisdictions now that are starting to see the deployment of these kinds of networks, both indoor and outdoor, co-locating head-ends and hub locations. And this is just the beginning of where we see these networks going. So while we're right at the beginning, as I would say, in this marketplace, there's a lot more to be built. So how big an opportunity is it? This is a forecast that was provided by IGR, and this gives you the growth of node installation in North America over the next 5 years. Now, I think IGR has a pretty good handle on the pulse of what's going on in the marketplace. We could certainly sit here and debate the absolute numbers. We could debate probably the timing of when all this is likely to happen for some very good reasons. But I think directionally the trend line is accurate. And it's certainly something that we're seeing in our markets that we're working in, that this densification that we're talking about is happening and will continue to happen. So the market opportunity is significant, and certainly is very different from when we first started the business, which I'll talk about in just a second. So when we started Extenet, our business thesis was around providing coverage solutions with distributed networks, which the state-of-the-art of the technology at that time was distributed antenna systems, in areas where obtaining macro site permits had proved to be prohibitive. And that really was the state of the business. Most of the networks that we were building at that time were focused on coverage solutions. And then in the fall of 2007, what happened? This little device that we call the iPhone was released. And our world changed. And that, coupled with additional smart devices being released into the network or into the ecosystem, and all the applications that came flooding with that, changed what we were doing from focusing on coverage solutions to providing capacity solutions. And that really is the state of play as we see it today. It is about solving these capacity problems. I think all of you who've been in the industry for a while would recognize that when these devices first came out, we grossly underestimated the impact that it was going to have on the network and the amount of traffic that they were going to generate. You could actually do useful work with these devices now. So that really is where we're at today in terms of the state of play. But now we have 5G coming. And 5G clearly will be about capacity enhancements, but more importantly, it's going to be about network functionality. And network functionality that will provide the ability to do the things that Mark described earlier with respect to IoT and new applications, and driving more of the intelligence of the network to the edge of the network. So, 5G is not just going to be about the individual phone or tablet user and enhancing their experience. It is going to be about network intelligence, and it's going to be a new architecture that we all have to become familiar with and be prepared to work with. But the key here, and I think this is the really important point, is that we have to find business models that will take advantage of the lower latency, the higher system capacity, the throughput, the energy efficiencies, and so forth, that will be able to generate the returns necessary to fund the network investments that are going to be required going forward to support 5G. You all are familiar, Jonathan referenced what's happened from an ARPU perspective with the carriers. That's critically important that we find other revenue sources in order to support this new advanced network architecture going forward. So this is just to give you a picture of the current state of play in terms of distributed networks, both indoor and outdoor. I think all of us as an industry have gotten a lot smarter and better about how we go about deploying these networks. There are certainly a lot of challenges, which I'll talk about in just a second. I think we've done a better job figuring ways to lower the cost and also to speed deployment. We're doing a better job co-locating head-end infrastructure into colo sites to lower the outright capital cost at the beginning, as well as the operating costs on these networks, but we still have a long way to go. And this is what we call hyperdensification, and that is many more nodes being deployed, more intelligence being pushed out to the edge of the networks, more networks being deployed indoors as well, and all of this is going to be coming fairly rapidly, again, if we can solve several problems. So this all looks great on paper, but how do we make this a reality? First, as I said earlier, we need to find business models, revenue models that will support the investments that are going to be required in the networks. Second, we need regulatory and jurisdictional environments that will support more rapid deployments and more cost-effective deployments. And third, we need to be smarter about the network architecture and also ways in which we can lower costs. If we don't have those three things, this is going to be a very difficult challenge in order to deploy this level of densification in the networks to support the applications that you just heard about. And this is where we see the market going. And as Jonathan referenced in his comments with respect to WIA, there is a lot of work going on with respect to the jurisdictional and the regulatory environments to help speed these deployments. For those of you who are involved in this, I think you all recognize that one of the long poles in the tent to getting these networks deployed is getting the permits to actually build the vertical infrastructure. Less so with the fiber infrastructure, but certainly more so with the vertical infrastructure. So that's absolutely going to be key to what we're going to be doing in the future. So I mentioned that there are some interesting things going on in the indoor market. With respect to venues, there's been a significant change in terms of how wireless networks are being funded and deployed. As Jonathan referenced earlier, there's a lot of pressure on the carriers from a revenue perspective. After years and years of ARPU growing at a reasonable rate with these all-you-can-eat data plans, the ARPU line has basically flattened out. So the ability to fund every single venue that venue owners would like to have built has been greatly hampered by this change in the economic dynamic of the marketplace. So what do we see? There's a bifurcation in the marketplace we see going on right now. It's not all the way there. There certainly hasn't been acceptance across the board from a real estate perspective, but we see a bifurcation in which there certainly will be venues which the carriers will fund. They can justify the economic throw in order to build those networks. But there's also going to be a lot of other venues in the ecosystem in which we believe that the venue owner is going to have to contribute some or all of the economic support for these networks going forward. Now, as I said, this hasn't been universally agreed to in the real estate environment yet, but we think it's going to get there. And our pitch to the venue owner is that you need to think about wireless coverage as another utility for your venue. It's that important to you. It's like water, heat, and air conditioning, lights, because your tenants want to have connectivity anytime and anywhere. And it's interesting. I'm sure many of you who've been involved in this space have been with people in the real estate industry who said, yeah, every time my lease agent goes into a building to try to sell some space, the first thing the client does is pull out their phone and start doing this to see if they have connectivity. There have been a couple studies that have taken place in the last year or two indicating that if you do have wireless coverage in the building, it does enhance the value of the building. And I'm sure there's a lot of debate about that, but it certainly is a proxy for your ability to lease up your space because you do have wireless coverage, certainly would support the thesis that it does enhance the value of that building. There's another dynamic that we're seeing as well in buildings. Having gone in there to build distributed networks in support of wireless coverage, one of the things we've also seen is that many buildings, particularly older buildings, need to greatly enhance their communication infrastructure to support their tenant services and building management systems. It's incredible. I didn't include a picture here, but there's some pretty interesting pictures of things that we've seen and how the communication infrastructure has been put together in these buildings. It looks like a bowl of spaghetti in terms of how the wiring has been pulled through that building to support the tenants. And it's an area we think it needs a lot of attention. So we're starting to spend more resources and efforts looking at trying to combine the building of our wireless network infrastructure and the broadband infrastructure to support tenant services and building management systems in these venues. And I think that's going to be an area that's going to continue to grow pretty rapidly over the next several years. New apps, IoT, generate more revenues to support the network architecture of the future, but it's all going to be about network intelligence at the edge of the network. This can't be done under the current architecture. with the amount of activity and the massive IoT deployments that Mark referenced earlier, that certainly we see coming forward as well. So this is a slide that my marketing guys absolutely love. This is really about, there are lots of different technologies that are being promoted out there to support IoT. Again, we think that it's going to be less about individual technologies and more about the network architecture. And thereby the focus, and certainly in terms of what we do, is going to be about how do we build this robust architecture that will provide the support for the applications and IoT that we see coming down the line in the not too distant future. So we think that distributed networks are absolutely going to be an increasingly critical component of the overall wireless network topology going forward. We see what we describe internally as hyperdensification being a part of that. We see more edge functionality, more network intelligence being pushed to the edge, and also more content being pushed to the edge as well to enhance services for users. And all of this in support of what we see as some pretty interesting new applications and IoT coming in the not too distant future. And so we don't sit up here and profess that we have all the answers, how all this is going to play out, but we do think that increased densification, edge functionality and intelligence, and converged communication infrastructure is going to be part of this new ecosystem that we're all going to be dealing with in the next several years. So with that, thank you very much. Any questions?
All right. That won't be good. We got two mics on. Let's pull that one back a little bit. All right, so first off, this is my hometown of West Palm Beach, so welcome. It's always good to come back and visit. For me, to first be able to speak to you, but I have a lot of family in the area, so it's always a good time to be able to come back and visit and see some of the great sites that the Palm Beach area has to offer. So hopefully you guys aren't just sitting in here, you get out a little bit in the evenings and see everything Palm Beach has to offer. So today we're going to talk about 5G, but we're going to talk about it more in the terms of the evolution of 5G. And we're going to talk about it in the sense, specifically focused more on the radio aspects. We'll cover a little bit beyond that, but on the radio aspect, and talk a lot about how we must, as an industry, blend into the urban landscape as we evolve the networks to support 5G. So first, I'd be remiss, a lot of people talk a lot about 5G, and there's a lot of people who think that 5G is this magical, singular event. The fact is that 5G is a lot of different components that all have to come together to deliver. Whether it be the virtualization of the core, whether it be the densification of the RAN, a change in the topology to the way that the transport between the cell sites and the core happen, as well as placement of content to allow greater latency. All of those things have to happen. So it's not a singular event, it's not a single day, it's an evolution. So 5G will provide the next generation of higher speeds, and it will provide lower latencies for customers. At AT&T, we're not waiting until the standards are complete, so we're rapidly on track. We think the lower layers will in fact get specified by the end of this year, which will allow the non-standalone configuration of 5G standard to be wrapped up with the ASN, what they call ASN1, which is kind of the locked-in set, in early next year, which will allow for the commercialization. It will allow for the silicon, it will allow for the infrastructure to quickly evolve to where we have standards based in our capability as soon as the end of 18, which for those who've been around and been through a few of the Gs, that's really unprecedented. Why is that important? It's important because what we see already happening today on our network. Data on our mobile network at AT&T has increased about 250,000% since 2007. Obviously, most people know that was driven by the advent of the iPhone and the evolution, and they just announced their 10th anniversary device coming out here soon. But now we start looking beyond that. It's no longer just about smartphones. It's about connecting all of the other things. So, while today most of that traffic is driven by video, tomorrow you not only have the increase in video, 4K video, you start to have the Internet of Things, augmented and virtual reality, smart home and cities, autonomous vehicles, and so much more. It's important that the continued development of our LTE Advanced network remains pressing along, because it does in fact lay the foundation for the evolution to 5G. So throughout 2017, and really even before that, we've been continuously upgrading our network to support technologies like carrier aggregation, 4x4 MIMO, LTE, License Assisted Access, or LAA, 256 QAM. A lot of those capabilities are enhanced through the densification work. In fact, when you combine all of those capabilities, licensed, unlicensed, 256 QAM, 4x4 MIMO, in a pilot that we did in San Francisco earlier this year, we've already achieved peak speeds in excess of 975 megabits per second. We believe that the network, however, is not just about speed. The future is not just about speed. It's also about lower latencies and higher reliability. So some exciting use cases are just around the corner. Some of these exciting and new use cases include things like autonomous cars, healthcare automation, and augmented reality, as well as accelerated adoption of new capabilities within more familiar areas like smart cities, smart grid, and smart homes. Massive connectivity, higher speeds, and lower latency will transform how data and content are consumed. So I want all you guys to put your imagination caps on for just a minute, and let's look a little bit into the future. So imagine that we have intelligent traffic switching that can adapt signaling to real-time traffic conditions and reduce congestion. Or let's imagine that we have intelligent navigation that can not only direct you to the address, but to an open parking spot within the vicinity of that address. Or imagine augmented reality glasses that describe relevant information about the environment that surrounds you. Maybe it's a nearby bus stop, maybe it's a restaurant rating, maybe it's a taxi rate or historic markers. Maybe it's something as simple as the weather forecast. In Palm Beach, yesterday it rained. You could know that, but today it's going to be beautiful. That's good information. But my favorite is I get to travel a lot. I miss a lot of children's events. And so imagine a day where you can live stream your child's soccer game to your family so that they can enjoy it in real time. Or you have a loved one who's sick. You've called 911, the ambulance has come. Maybe we have intelligent ambulance services that are fully integrated with the hospital systems so patients can receive doctor-provided care while en route. Or first responders monitored and updated with environmental and hazard data while on site. The fact of the matter is, all of those cases that I've just imagined, we're not stretching the imagination that far. Those are capabilities that are in fact possible today, which will be enhanced through 5G. What this means is that inventors and innovators haven't really even begun to imagine all the solutions that tomorrow's 5G will enable. I remember back when we first started talking about LTE, people said, we've got all these great capabilities. What will we do with all of this new capability that LTE introduces? Well, we've consumed it and more. And so I think it's pretty safe to assume that as we start to enable greater capabilities, the imaginations will run wild. So as we've stated before, AT&T has already seen near gigabit peak speeds while conducting our pilots. Outdoor small cells, or picocells, are instrumental in delivering these near gigabit speeds. 5G will enable even faster multi-gigabit peak speeds through the use of new millimeter wave spectrum, with individual carrier bandwidth expected to be standardized in multiples of 50, 100 and 200 megahertz per channel. That's important to realize because today's maximum carrier in LTE is only 20 megahertz. And so as you start to introduce millimeter wave spectrum with wider frequency channels, we can put more bits, which is going to allow for those higher speeds, but as well the signaling overhead that it takes today to aggregate those channels, we can actually start to make bigger channels without the aggregation capabilities. 5G is not just about speed. It is also very important that we understand that it also is focused on enhancing latency, reliability, and connection density. So let's focus a little bit more on the future technology options. Small cells today are deployed in dense urban areas and have become a critical component for delivering a high-performing wireless network by helping to address both capacity and coverage concerns. Small cells are key for both LTE and looking forward to 5G deployments. Small cells already today are evolving in complexity, requiring multiple technologies per node to deliver ever-increasing performance. Today, AT&T is already deploying higher carrier counts, 4x4 MIMO counts, even in the small cell layer. So we're already doing that from a license perspective. We're beginning to introduce the unlicensed aspect of LAA radios on top of that. You start to combine those capabilities, and that's what starts to introduce the gigabit types of speeds. Why is that important? The complexity of all of that, you now have a multi-port antenna covering multiple spectrum bands. You also have multiple radios that are on those poles that are connected to those antennas. Right? So you already look from a complexity perspective that we're putting a lot on these poles. In the future, many of these nodes are going to be upgraded to support 5G millimeter wave technology, utilizing millimeter wave, which now also needs to go over the pole. Let's make no mistake, macro sites don't go away. We need macro sites to provide wide area IoT coverage, but also to provide wide area coverage for the existing services. Where small cells will come into play is to provide the density that's going to be necessary to provide the capacity, while also providing coverage into those hard-to-reach places. So, people start getting nervous when we talk about we're putting all of this extra equipment, and there's still more to come. Small cells can accommodate a set of concerns, but we as an industry need to work together to promote viable small cell solutions that are aesthetically pleasing, functional, and flexible. We have to work closely with the municipalities to promote an environment conducive for rapid deployment. And so for that, AT&T is driving its collaborators and vendors to develop small cell form factors that can be unobtrusively integrated into the urban streetscape, with key emphasis on aesthetics, functionality, and flexibility. If we don't get the aesthetics right, we're not going to be able to build it because it will be intrusive, so people need to keep that in mind. But on the flip side, we also have to make sure that what we build is both functional and flexible. So if we do things that take away those other two components, it doesn't work. If we do things that doesn't focus on the unobtrusive nature, it doesn't work as well. All three are required. In these pictures, where in fact we have both licensed and unlicensed, we have MIMO configurations, and we're doing so in an unobtrusive way with concealment to make sure that it's uncluttered and more appealing from a sightline perspective. It's also important to realize that there are concealment alternatives, and there is not one size that fits all. If we consider the enormous forecast for small cells across all of the operators, and the variation in geography and streetscapes within our municipalities, there is no one size fits all. We have to build a toolbox with various options and alternatives that can be adapted to the environment at hand. Increasingly, the wireless network domain and the smart cities domain are overlapping, providing an excellent opportunity for synergies to improve the cost model and the deployment model for both. Many smart cities initiatives deploy equipment on the same poles, streetlights, as small cells, leaving the need to coordinate the design and deployment tasks to ensure optimal compatibility. It doesn't work if we work to optimize the operator's equipment. It equally doesn't work if we don't optimize for the smart cities. They all need to come together. They all need to, all need to have optimal compatibility. So I mentioned that 5G is coming. We already have this complex site. We already have a lot of equipment that's on those poles. And now we have 5G coming. So what is the impact of the 5G small cell design? It's important to realize that a critical difference with 5G and our millimeter wave is that the radio and the antenna have to be integrated. When you get up into those higher frequencies, you cannot have coaxial cable or feeders between a radio unit and antenna. You can't afford those losses. The antennas themselves are active antennas. They support massive MIMO or smart beam steering, which are necessary to get any type of coverage out of these new millimeter wave. Propagation characteristics of millimeter wave, say that 3 times fast, may limit concealment options, as any material that gets placed in front of the antennas could in fact severely impact the performance. So on one hand I just said, hey, we've got to have all this concealment, and now I'm saying, but wait a minute, you can't put anything in front of them that will impact. So what are we going to do? So the other component that we also have to consider is the millimeter wave. Any of the transmitting elements need to go as close to the top of the poles as possible. So at AT&T, we are working with major radio equipment vendors already. So we haven't even deployed the first new radio technology beyond our pilot sites in the cities that we've announced. We're already talking to our partners about miniaturizing these components so that we can start to scale. So we're talking about miniaturization of Pico deployment, or to facilitate Pico deployments, but we're also focused on the form factors that will blend into the urban environments. In this particular picture, there's a collar image that illustrates one such concept that we're working with Ericsson to add millimeter wave coverage to an existing LTE C-RAN. So what you can see in this picture is you've got the radios for the sector, but then we put some fillers to give a collar appearance. And so that's one example of options that may come that allow the antenna to still be unobstructed. It's still placed close to the top of the pole, but from an aesthetics perspective, it looks like it's a cylindrical collar at the top of the pole that does start to blend from an aesthetics perspective. In this image, it is in fact showing one of our existing deployments that have LTE, both licensed and unlicensed, while also adding millimeter wave. So we talked a moment ago about, it's not just about the mobile operators competing for space. We could talk about Wi-Fi operators competing for space. But we're also talking about smart cities providers competing for space. The fact is that some of these streetlights are becoming technology hubs. So if we consider the various technologies and smart city solutions that municipalities want to deploy, right, that drives us into these poles evolving into technology hubs. This particular slide shows examples of various technologies that municipalities may consider deploying on the very same poles as small cells. So everything from LED lighting to public safety video to signage, digital banners, public alerts, emergency assistance, sensors, charging stations, all of that is in that single solution. And so there are options when we have multiple things that are trying to be done, but you have to choose those options based on all of those things that are trying to be done. Go back to the one size doesn't fit all. You have to choose the deployment options that meet your needs. And so operators need to integrate smart city planning into their densification plans and consider the synergies between what the city wants to do with smart city providers as well as what we need to do to provide optimal cellular type of service. It can be shared components like power and fiber that help simplify the deployment. So it always comes back to the value proposition. There's three parties in a lot of these deployments that have to be considered. You have the municipalities themselves. Why is it important? What's in it for them? You have the mobile operators that are trying to deploy LTE and 5G technology. What's in it for them? And then you have smart cities providers that are trying to deliver solutions to the municipalities. What's in it for them? And so if we work in a collaborative way with the municipal government, operators can in fact develop solutions that meet the needs of all parties. For the cities and municipalities, by focusing on the aesthetics, right, we can put this equipment in a way that is aesthetically appealing to where the citizens of the community are not saying, what the heck are all over these poles? That's important. We can support multiple technologies that are aligned with the government's smart city and next generation communications vision. Make no mistake about it, while we have the smart cities that enable great efficiencies for the municipalities, having broadband offerings that the citizens of the municipality can take advantage of no matter where they are is equally important. If we consider them all together, we in fact can simplify the deployment that minimizes disruption of the municipal services. For mobile operators, if we work early, aka now, we can start to develop forward-looking designs that start to evolve what's the equipment that's going on now, but the equipment that will be added later. And if we work on that, hopefully during the initial design phase, we can go and start talking about how does it evolve so that when we go to add the next future generations of technology, as long as we're sticking within the aesthetic guidelines and the capabilities that have been discussed, we can add to it without impacting the aesthetics. Right? It's already been discussed. That will help speed the evolution and introduction of these new 5G services. Obviously, there's synergies. If we work on it together with the smart cities, there's some shared components that in fact could speed the deployment while also potentially reducing cost. For the smart cities providers, by utilizing the synergies with the small cell operators to reduce costs and provide optimal performance of all parties' equipment, we can, in fact, the same statement as before, we can drive the collaborative planning process that helps manage the complexities and potentially reduce the cost. The importance here is that all parties' considerations and needs have to be taken into account. We can't go and focus on one at the expense of the other. When we think about 5G on the mobile operator side, right, there's some things that are required where the performance won't be there. If the performance isn't there, we have to consider alternatives. And so when we think about this, we have to think about it in a collective way that supports all parties. I think that was my last slide. I've got a couple of minutes if the audience has questions. There's a mic roaming the room. There's one right down here.
Good morning.
Morning.
What is the role of smart cities in 5G networks in public safety and how that might relate to FirstNet?
So when we think about smart cities in public safety and FirstNet, first and foremost, the solutions provided have to consider the services that FirstNet requires. When we think about smart cities, it's possible that some of the sensors, et cetera, could in fact tie in and communicate directly with the first responders. It's possible that through smart cities and some of the smart traffic grids that you can expedite routes to hospitals, it's possible that, it's endless, right? When you think about it, you start tying the systems together. The FirstNet network is all about connectivity. It's all about communications. There's certain services that are provided with that. You can enhance that potentially with some of the smart city offerings that basically now take data from there and direct to feed those first responders via the FirstNet network. Other questions? All right, I don't see any hands. All right, well with that, I thank you guys very much and enjoy your stay at the Palm Beaches.